Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to episode 32 of the Stevie Richards Show. Today, we are going to talk about something near and dear to my heart and quite scary in a couple ways because there's a lot of twists and turns. The lead up to ECW's first pay per view in 1997, April 13th, 1997, which may not have ever happened. We're talking about ECW Barely Legal. It was quite a twisty and windy and dramatic road just to get to the pay per view. But I'm not alone. I was alone then. I felt very alone. I didn't have you weren't even born then. Were you?
What?
No, my co-host
Yes, I was
James.
10.
My co-host James.
Yeah, I was 10.
You were 10. Okay.
I was.
You didn't even know.
Okay.
You didn't even know that you were 3 years away from absolutely, undeniably hating Steven Richards of the Right to Censor. You didn't even know it. You didn't even know that was it wasn't even a thought in your mind. Much less 20-some years later, you'd be working with the same guy that you hated.
I was 7 years away from Paul Heyman letting me wrestle on the shows without checking my ID.
A little hint for later.
Isn't it just? Yeah, we're going to be talking about the lead up to ECW Barely Legal, but there's 6 months of just calamities that keep on happening. It's just at the worst possible times. One of them is, of course, the mass transit incident. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the crucifix angle, which Stevie talked about actually on the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD. I remember you talking about that. Plus some other stuff leading up to ECW Barely Legal, the first pay-per-view, getting cancelled numerous times and then somehow getting on pay-per-view as well. But before we do, I was going to actually go straight to the news, but before we do, we've got plugs. I've got 2 books, one on Owen Hart, one on The Rock. And I've also got a YouTube channel, James Romero on the YouTube channel. I posted something about Drew McIntyre, and for goodness sake, it got over 200,000 views. I can't believe it. Then something on Hulk Hogan, which has done something as well. So my little part-time, whenever I feel like it, talking about the news a few days, a week is doing quite well, and I encourage you all to go there and join the fun, I guess. Otherwise, more importantly, Stevie has plugs as well. YouTube, Stevie Richards Fitness. What's the latest thing on Stevie Richards Fitness?
Trying to stay alive. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So I do have some equipment coming this week. The assembly should be very interesting, but the inflammation's down a little bit on my spine. But a lot of stuff from teeter, inversion, decompression stuff. Even got a power tower. By the way, spoiler on that. They sent the wrong one because I wanted the bigger back pad that had the ability to do assisted pull-ups and dips just so I can be safe when I do it. But they sent a different model. But I definitely have to do calisthenics. I've been doing isometrics. This week, I'm documenting all this, by the way, for the next Stevie Richards Fitness video. I was able to do a little bit of rowing, light rowing, stretching, cardio, and especially working out with bands. Because I was saying to myself, I was like, man, if there was only a good resistance program out there, a resistance band program to be more specific, and that might have been my CT moment right there because I was like, I have 2 of them. Wow. My wife was right. I am an idiot. I do have a theory, though, before we get started. I do dive into rabbit holes and I have theories. And I don't know whether we need to rename you the Black Widow, James Romero.
Oh, why?
Well, just think about it. Dutch is out for the 2nd time. I've been hospitalized. Yeah. I haven't checked on Shane or Morocco in a while. I don't know what's going on with them. And who else? Who else have you worked with, Black Widow?
In fairness, Don is well.
Oh, that makes me feel a whole lot better. Don's doing great.
Shane's well as well. I spoke to him like a month ago or so. He's doing great. I'm hoping to go and see him in a few weeks.
They're doing great because they don't have shows with you anymore. There's no Final Destination.
I know they've recovered.
Yeah, I wonder if
they've recovered from the. Oh yeah, I hate to say I've not heard from Dutch in a while as well. So he's still recovering. He's still in the rehab and everything. So I need to chase him up and make sure he's okay. But that's actually why I started my YouTube channel, or at least started posting stuff on my YouTube channel, because the first time in a while I actually had less to do than normal. So I thought, well, I might as well. And also thinking of expanding it in new and interesting ways. But I'll hint at that no more because we haven't really fleshed out. Chris was over yesterday and we just sat around the table for like 3 hours coming up with
Is he doing okay after that?
What I could do.
How's he doing after that?
Oh yeah, it was a good therapy session.
You're like a walking, talking, living, breathing Final Destination movie. I'm just saying.
Yes. Everyone I work with does go on to die somehow. But no, that's not true. They just end up getting horribly sick. Now, one more thing for the plugs that we haven't touched on yet, and it's the most important one, is the Stevie Richards Show Patreon. And what have we got coming up this week?
It's actually the Stevie and James Patreon. We're now basically going into this together. Watch alongs, other things, obviously premium content. You get the pre and sometimes the post show if we're not in a rush to get out of here. But we do a lot in the pre-show now, including watch alongs. People really like the multiplayer game one that was this past Monday at the time of this recording. A lot of feedback on that. Next week is the infamous video that you did not know even existed and you doubted it. Colonel De Beers, Scott Hall, anabolic steroids. That's all you need to know. If that's enough of a hook to get you to subscribe to Patreon. And we just did a full watch along of the mass transit incident, which will be one of the things that we discuss here in episode 32.
And not only that, we actually watched a clip from Inside Edition
Oh,
that
they
covered
didn't
it
care.
as well.
They didn't care. Well, too graphic everywhere else. Inside Edition. Come on. Slow-mo that. Zoom it in. I sound like, who do I sound like with that? I sound like Vince. Zoom it in.
It's all here.
It is.
What did he used to say? What's the face thing?
This is where we make money, pal. And I was like, you just don't know you're doing Walk Like an Egyptian. I mean,
the Vogue.
Vogue with this. Yeah. He never seen it. He doesn't even know either one of those are. I don't know which computer of Vince's was working at that time. He has like multiple computers.
Well, if he wasn't licking his lips and dropping his trousers at you, then hopefully it wasn't his third brain.
Oh my God.
What a maniac. The amended lawsuit that this isn't something we do on the Stevie Richards show, but I did on my channel, since normally we do it on Dutch's show because his is more news based, but since Dutch is still out for now, that I ended up talking about what the differences were between the amended lawsuit and basically just named more people and just dobbed more people in. Basically, all they did was just and when there were names that were WWE Officer 1 or something like that, it would end up being Nick Khan. They basically just put more names in, I guess. But I'll be interested to see if that does make it to court, to trial, and not litigation.
Settlement. Arbitration is what they're trying to get.
Arbitration.
That's what Vince,
Thank
I
you.
think
I'll be interested.
they were close to arbitration, and then they brought the new details out, right? They were about to go.
No. The lawsuit was paused for 6 months while the federal government investigated. That was a voluntary pause by Janelle Grant's people. So we're going to talk about the Royal Rumble briefly before we get into all the ECW stuff, including a couple of what went wrongs. But the first thing was that Jey Uso and Charlotte Flair won their respective Royal Rumble matches at the 2025 WWE Royal Rumble PLE. Straight off the bat, those two as the winners. Would you have picked either of them? I think Charlotte was a surprise entrant.
No, Charlotte, I think that she was, with the vignette, you assumed she was going to make her return at the Royal Rumble. Two different reactions to this. Obviously, there's an internet reaction to Jey Uso, which is like, what can you do? There's a guy that's over, you're saying push him. He wins the Royal Rumble. Now there's some pushback on that. Was he my pick? He was my, just watching somebody really be there for a while and coming from a tag team into their own and them standing out from that point and always being elevated and then being pigeonholed in a way with the main event gimmick. Well, I've spoke about it before. You got to stay up there if you're going to have that gimmick. But Jay managed with the way he can talk, and he has incredible charisma. He can talk. I can tell the difference, though, and we'll get to the Monday Night Raw thing after that. When Jay is talking, and when someone's writing for him and it's not his voice. Monday, we'll get into it now, was that. Everything leading up to that was Jay, especially with the Sami Zayn stuff and everything. But getting back to the Rumble, he was definitely somebody that you want to be the non-predictable winner of that Royal Rumble. Everybody assumed it was going to be Cena because this is Cena's retirement tour, which I thought was going to end at WrestleMania, but now people are saying it's the entire year of 2025. Which is it? I mean, that's the confusing part.
Right. So what I thought it was going to be, I thought it was going to be the next WrestleMania, but I think it's the end of this year. It was always going to be like a year-long thing, but it's starting at the Royal Rumble this year and then pretty much, and then ending at the end of this year. I don't think he's going to be at WrestleMania 43 is the answer.
Okay. So that's kind of, I mean, it's going to be great no matter what for Cena. He's a legend and all the stuff he's done for the business, but I thought from the time he announced it that it was going to lead up to WrestleMania, and then we'd get some really interesting twists and turns. With context, what I'm talking about is Jay going over with me thinking that WrestleMania was going to be about Cena. This is a quote from The Rock. The WrestleMania should be about Cena. That's where I got the idea that was his last match. But I'm still thinking what they're going to do is, in their mind, the way they book, Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble. He's over. We have Elimination Chamber. I have a feeling that Jay's going to lose that spot to maybe Cena or somebody else. I assumed, here's the surprise I assumed for the men's Royal Rumble. It would have made it very interesting because Russo and Ben also were talking about this on our other show. Jay's in there at the end. He's 29 or 29 guys, 28 guys, I should say, are thrown out of the ring, but Jay's in there alone. The final boss music hits. It literally the final boss on the Rumble is The Rock. And Rock goes over, and you're gonna get Rock and Cody one-on-one in that match. That could still kinda happen, but man, Elimination Chamber, it's an absolute shoot. That cage does not forgive. I don't know what The Rock and Hollywood, maybe regular matches, but in this vein, if he's still in the Hollywood kinda bubble with the insurance and everything like that, are they gonna allow him to be in that match? Dude, everybody in that match gets hurt to some degree.
I don't think The Rock's going to be there at all. I think he'll be there the year after. But what I wanted to say
You mean
was,
like no WrestleMania, no post-Rumble leading up to Mania? Like he's not
I don't think The Rock will be there at all. He might appear at WrestleMania, but I've got a feeling he's just going to be out because there's not really a story for him at the moment. Because Cody, okay, I'm figuring Cody's going to wrestle John Cena. John Cena will win the Elimination Chamber, and Jay will wrestle Gunther for his world title. Which brings me to the point I was going to make, is that it's the one good thing about having two world titles. It means that the Royal Rumble is far more wide open now as far as a winner, because I don't think many people really predicted Jay at all. But then he wins it, and then it makes sense because then he can then go to Gunther, and he can, main event night one. And then Cody will main event night two against whoever it might be. I suspect it will be John Cena, because I think the theory at the moment is probably going to be CM Punk and Logan Paul, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. There seem to be the big 5 matches announced so far. And then possibly Charlotte and whoever it might be. Tiffany Stratton, I guess. But we'll talk about Charlotte in a minute, though. But what do you think specifically of Jey Uso's... I mean, it's been a pretty meteoric rise for him. And even me, I was just like, when you're a twin as well, I mean, that pigeonholes you more than anything else.
It's like the old Killer Bees thing, like the man, just being in a tag team alone is going to pigeonhole you to break out as a single star. And we kind of see Jimmy trying to find his way, but having a little bit more difficulty finding his voice, character, and everything that Jay got. Actually, when Jimmy was out during that COVID era, Jay was a star. You could see he was a star and all the stuff he did with Roman. I think this is one of those things where what Dutch says, you're talking about a swerve at the Elimination Chamber. Jay wanted, but then he lost at Elimination Chamber. To me, in a Vince McMahon term, that takes the bloom off the rose of the Royal Rumble. That when you win it, you punch your ticket to WrestleMania. So now everybody's going to be like, yeah, you punch your ticket until Elimination Chamber. The 2 world titles, I disagree with you as well, because obviously 2 nights, but they have not elevated Gunther. They haven't done anything with Gunther. Think about it. He was for a while with that IC belt, really, really over with that. At the beginning of the world title, you hoped it would be something where he would be that champion to be on the level of the WWE one. I don't think that is. Let's throw another thing into it as well. Punk wants to be in the main event of one of these nights of WrestleMania. He's obviously politicking to try to wrestle Cody. I don't know if him and Gunther would mesh. Him and Cody's a great story. But do you think Punk's going to win the Elimination Chamber and go on to wrestle Cody? We have a lot of different things that could come out of this. But I stand by my original thought that I still believe one title, one Royal Rumble winner, one path, and one major push to that pay-per-view. And dare I say it, I would put Jay over. Why would you just, like Dutch says, I'll get back to that point. Why not just go with what people want to see and just Occam's razor, just go straight through it instead of doing all these twists and turns?
I'm gonna come out with something really controversial now. I
Want to save it for
have
your channel?
never liked. No, 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 I'm not. I'm gonna do it right here, baby. I've never liked the number one. Sorry, the person who wins the Royal Rumble is the number one contender for WrestleMania. I think there should be something else on the line because it limits the scope. Not now that we've got two world titles, but then I've never liked two world titles, and pretty much no one else does either. It limits the scope of the amount of people who can win the Royal Rumble. I mean, having two world titles opens it up somewhat, but I like the idea that, in the first couple of years, I mean, Big John Studd, but, that was 89 John Studd. He wasn't really, that was a bit of a wet fart of a finish, I think. But, like a Jim Duggan can win it, or the untelevised one where One Man Gang could win it, or Ric Flair was the champion. Sorry, no one was the champion. Was anybody
No,
the
he
champion?
won the championship
at that point?
by winning the Royal Rumble. He won the championship.
He did?
Yeah.
Who was the champion going into it? Hulk Hogan? It must have been, I guess.
It was vacated.
Or the championship was held up.
Vacated, I believe. I'm not sure. Was it vacated after Tuesday in Texas?
I've got a feeling it might have been. Yeah. So, yeah, that's probably where it was. And then Ric Flair ends up winning it, which I love that. But the whole
let me
number
stop
one
you right
contender
there.
thing.
I hate to stop you in mid-thought. Why not put the title on the line of Royal Rumble and have the champion in the Royal Rumble? And now he's literally defending against 29 other people.
Because then it's unbelievably unfair. But that's never stopped WWE before from putting champions in six-pack challenges and whatever else it might be. The champion can always be number 30. So they've got a chance, I guess. But
that's a great point. I think there is some room for tweaking and updating. And we're not fans of tired old tropes. Royal Rumble has a great feel and everything to it, but don't you think right now, outside of the surprise entrances, which is or the returns, those are the things that get the biggest reactions. A lot of other people who came out didn't get reactions. And on that point, I know I'm breaking each thing down and splitting hairs. When that happens, that's creative's fault. When you can only predict or guess or assume that 4, maybe 5 people are going to win the Rumble, if not less, that's creative's fault for the whole year of not getting talent over enough. So you say, I don't know who's going to win. And when the champion, I love that idea now that I think about it more, when the champion puts the title on the line, but you got 2 world titles. You see how you run into all these roadblocks. So we have to have 2 Royal Rumbles now. It's such a they've painted themselves into quite a bit of corners with some of the ways they book and do things, and then they think they can just, well, let's just veer off and let's do a quick left turn, and the fans will understand. But there's going to come a point where the fans are not going to understand anymore.
Do you know, at least with this Royal Rumble, I mean, it goes to WWE's credit just how many people could have likely have won it. So you had your Roman Reigns, your CM Punks, your Seth Rollins, your Jey Usos, your John Cena. That's 5. I mean, your Drew McIntyres who went out. Who else? I mean, that's at least 6 people there. The Rock, if he'd turned back up, was 7. That's at least 7 people who could have viably won it, and no one would have been disappointed.
Well, I should speed look awesome in his 20 seconds again dropped on his head.
God, we're going to be watching that soon enough. Charlotte Flair. I remember I wasn't watching it live. I was watching it the morning after, and I was watching it live, and I remember watching it at the time, just thinking, okay. And I sort of thought it was a bit like the Britt Baker thing. She's been gone a while, and I don't think anyone missed her. And then she wins the Royal Rumble. She's sort of just fast-tracked back to WrestleMania straight away. And I just don't think that's what the people wanted. I mean, there are so many, good women there who could have used that spot instead. Like your Rhea Ripley's and Liv Morgan's, or your Roxanne Perez, or your Stephanie Vaquer's, or whoever it might be, or your Tiffany Stratton's. Just there's so many people out there now, so many women out there who are so good that I think it's just a bit of a bitter taste in fans' mouths that we're just going straight back to, years prior, and no one really asked for it. What was your feeling about Charlotte winning? The fans were quite fine at the time, watching
not
it then
on Raw,
Raw.
though.
No.
Well, my thought about it is, her as a worker, I'm assuming when she was coming back, or they knew she was coming back and gave her the vignettes, that they already knew that she was gonna go over. Whatever way that goes over in the locker room or doesn't go over with the other women that have been there, that's a whole 'nother story, and I'm sure there's some people that don't have great feelings about her just coming right back and being fast-tracked into winning the Rumble. With that being said, as a worker and wanting the fans to get behind you emotionally and actually being very self-aware that you've been gone for what? A full year, maybe more? You've been gone for quite a long time. And she had this whole rehab thing on social media that Russo told me about that like was an awesome way that she was documenting and not the vignettes they gave her, but maybe the people would have appreciated her more showing all the work she did to get back into shape, to get back in the ring. They didn't show any of that. They showed the JBL Alberto Del Rio or the you know the rich who can identify with a woman laying on a yacht and you're like, I gotta work. You know what I mean? That might have been the beginning of the end right there. Also, as a worker, you want to demonstrate the hero's journey. So even if she had vignettes after the Rumble and didn't come back at the Rumble, and they started showing her rehab and recovery, working out, doing everything, some setbacks. And then she came back at WrestleMania after 3 months of whatever, and somebody calling her out. Like Seth Rollins kept, calling people out, but he had a mystery opponent. It was Cody Rhodes a few years ago. And that was really good. Why not have it to where somebody like a Roxanne Perez or anybody that's new starts talking trash about Charlotte Flair? And Charlotte makes a return at WrestleMania. Maybe she squashes her out of nowhere. And here we are. Now you bought yourself months and months of getting yourself back over, not assuming that the fans are instantly going to accept you, that the fans are instantly going to treat you like you're over. Here's a really tough question that every worker will never ask themselves. This includes me when I was working. Does anybody even remember me? Does anybody even remember me? I've been off a year. There's all these girls that have stepped up, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, even the Raquel Rodriguez, Nia Jax is back and she's improving each and every week. Tiffany Stratton, Bailey's back. You got the girls from Damage Control. Who else? The Zoe Stark girl looks good. You got
Even Nia Jax improved
White.
to a
I said
point.
Nia Jax.
Oh, I'm
Nia
sorry.
Jax improves each and every week and losing weight
Yeah.
and looking better in the ring. I don't think she took an honest look. Did she even watch the product? Lots of people don't watch the product if they're not on it, if they're not involved with things.
And do you know who's some of the most popular, two of the most popular women there? Chelsea Green, who's great, and Jordan Grace, who's just signed as well, that everyone wants to see what they can
Talk
do.
about Piper Niven, too. She's underrated with what she can do as a monster. And these are two girls in the Royal Rumble, too. How Piper Niven and Nia Jax weren't in there at least till near the end or anywhere close to the end. That's an Andre the Giant, Big John Studd. Bigger people can last longer in those battle royal situations. But, she's been going through some personal stuff too and everything. And there's a lot of stuff that figures into this where I would have eased her back in to the whole thing. And then you got girls to work. You got a roadmap to get you back to the title. Your whole angle is I'm going to get back and win the world title by the end of 2025. Maybe on the same show, Cena wins the world title at the end of the year. It's a special event. I think they robbed her and she robbed herself of being way more over than she ever was before by just inserting her. And I think on Raw, the fans did let her know, like, you can't just come back and assume we're going to cheer you right away because we have new toys that we can cheer. Did you get that feeling as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think, like Britt, like the business has passed by a bit because Britt was never that great of an in-ring worker. I mean, she was more personality than, going in the ring. Charlotte's not. She's always, I mean, that match with Rhea Ripley at the WrestleMania before last was really, really good. And
By the way, I
she can
hate
still
it.
go,
By the way, I
obviously.
hate it when she sat on her butt against the ring apron or against the skirt and was acting like a proud mama when Rhea beat her. That was so off. Go back and look at it. After Rhea went over,
Yeah.
Charlotte stayed at ringside, sat down, and was smiling like she was proud of her for doing. You wait till you get to the back for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they even shot it. They shot that. It was very strange.
There's two ways of doing a Royal Rumble win, right? As far as, someone returning. The Triple H way, where they had Creed, for goodness sake, for months on end, playing, and then him doing his rehab
Eating
and
his
his journey
burger and
back.
fries
And
after he rehabbed at the bar.
yeah, oh yeah. No,
I
he
love
had to
that
put on a bit of
part.
weight, obviously. And then and it was great. I mean, like the reaction when he came back and he won the Royal Rumble. Now the creative between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, it was terrible because that was over a Bulldog and Chris Jericho, and really it was Stephanie McMahon. But that's not the point. It was the Royal Rumble return. Everyone was happy he was back, and everyone was happy he won. Then there was Batista. If you remember, I think it was 2014 where they did some vignettes. Batista's coming back. Everyone could see where it was going. And you had, at the time, Daniel Bryan right there, the fans' pick, the fans' choice. Everyone wanted him to win. And even though they booked Daniel Bryan to be eliminated very early, everyone saw where it was leading to. And Batista basically being given, the office favors, a WrestleMania main event that no one wanted to see. And then, at least to WWE's credit, they, like with The Rock and Cody Rhodes last year, they pivoted when they saw the crowd reaction, and rightly so. But it was like a Batista thing. It's almost like an entitlement,
Yeah. Well, Hunter was figured in a little bit more than Charlotte, so that's why
Yeah.
you had YouTube Beautiful Day and all that stuff. We hope we won't get content ID on that, but you had a lot of vignettes of the he. Well, now that you said it, 1-to-1 analogy. How over was Hunter showing his rehab going back to the Rumble? I rest my case just with that. But it was WrestleMania 30. That was New Orleans. I'm testing my CT right now. Daniel Bryan gets eliminated. Then it was Batista versus Randy Orton. So two system talents from OVW, their favorites in there, and people did not want to see it. They had to do such damage control that Daniel Bryan needed to wrestle twice. He wrestled Triple H to open the show, got hurt. I love that angle. Gives the babyface a lot of sympathy. He had to work twice, and Hunter needed to work him himself to get him at least back on track during the pay-per-view. And without
And do you know where they got that booking? Do you know where they got that booking that I think people always forget? Hulk Hogan and Goldberg. People forget that Goldberg, I think, wrestled Scott Hall earlier in the day on the same
on the
show.
Georgia Dome?
Yeah.
No. He was scheduled to wrestle Hogan. They only did 3 or 4 days of promoting the match.
No. I'm saying that it was if you can beat Scott Hall earlier in the day, then you can wrestle Hogan.
Oh, I don't remember that. I thought it just booked it as Hogan versus Goldberg.
If I'm wrong, my God, I'm going to be upset, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. I'll edit it out either way.
Oh, there.
if I'm wrong.
Now you got to keep it in.
Oh, well, fair enough then. That being said, Raw, the next night, and Charlotte's doing. Here's the thing: she's almost always been a heel. Is it just that assumption, that grace period where you come back after a while, you just assume people are going to cheer you, which they did at the Rumble, but then she wins over a lot more popular people. Dare I say, Alexa Bliss, returning. She returned, and I think if she'd won, she would have got a lot better of a reception. Why do you think that the fans turned on Charlotte, and what do you think of Charlotte's response to the fans booing her?
Well, doing that live and expecting, this is where I said before, talent needs to be super honest and super accountable and assess the situation from a third party or trust somebody that's going to give you the honest truth and not just be an enabler and a yes person that you are over, you are great, and it's going to be awesome. And I have no doubt that when she went to the back, that enabling continued. Don't worry, it's great, you're over. They're just whatever. And that wasn't like a Philadelphia crowd. That was a Midwest crowd, right? So they're usually pretty accepting of certain things that they're fed. So it's not New York or Philly or any place where, you could do that, or you would expect that to be done, but you still need to prepare. How are people going to think? What are they going to feel about this? What I feel like is they were so entrenched with that new crop of female talent and they were emotionally attached to all they got to do is be emotionally attached to one other one. And that's where the turn happens. And really, let's think about it. This is my case with Cody Rhodes sometimes, although his work, his selling, the sympathy he can garner from the in-ring stuff and getting beat up and everything and wanting the fans wanting him to get back and make a comeback, to me, that's almost countered by he's wearing suits. He has a pocket watch. He looks like Homelander from The Boys. He's a heel. First look at Cody as a heel. With Charlotte, she's on a yacht. She's you're not seeing her rehab. It looks like she's just relaxing on a year-long vacation. The bathing suit, this has nothing to do with winning the Royal Rumble. So whether they fast-tracked her or they knew she was gonna win it when the vignettes were gonna air, totally, totally the wrong choice. They should have showed her down and dirty, no makeup, working out. Dude, I wish I could work out like she does. I think I'm intense. This girl has a professional athletic background, and she had a really, really bad knee injury. That was it, the knee injury, correct?
Mhm.
Reconstructive surgery, if I'm not mistaken. Show it. And I mean, show it from the very beginning. That way, the people will never have her out of their minds or out of their hearts. And then somebody talks crap about her for a year until she comes back. Then you got a girl that's over and put in her place, the heel, but then continues to try to hurt Charlotte on the way maybe to WrestleMania or on the way to something. This could have been played out a whole lot of different ways, but the way they did it, and oh, she's over, and she'll be instantly over. She wins, and they'll accept her. That might not be the case. She might be a heel, and now her and Rhea do have a match because Rhea's a babyface. So now they can kind of save it and make it make sense. But now all the other stuff that you could have got out of Charlotte is now completely lost.
Now, this is. Oh, by the way, I'm absolutely right. Bill Goldberg pinned Scott Hall, and due to a pre-match stipulation, Goldberg earned a world title shot against Hulk Hogan. So there you go.
Cool.
Nobody seems to remember that one.
Well, because
You had me doubting
when you
that.
use common sense or logic or creative logic as a wrestler, you're going to say, why would they have Goldberg come out earlier if he's going to main event against Hogan in the Georgia Dome? The
But
answer,
he's an outlier. He's an outlier. People cheered him more the
they
second
did, but
time.
in theory, you're like, I don't get that.
Mm. One more thing, and I
He
don't know
might
if
as
this is
well
me
run
being
the
a bit
gauntlet against the
conspiratorial.
whole NWO and made the whole 2 or 3 hours Goldberg wrestling everybody. And that would have been good for him.
I promise you, no one would have been disappointed. I wouldn't have been. I would have loved it. It was announced earlier the same day of WWE Raw that Charlotte, or real name Ashley Flair, had divorced Andrade last summer, or initiated divorce proceedings last summer. Do you think? I don't know if it's like overtly or not. Do you think that made more fans boo her? Because I guess because most fans there live and most fans watching are men, and they will automatically assume that it's the woman's fault for a marriage breaking down. And I was thinking, well, oh God, right, well, she's just divorced Andrade, who we like. She's a heel. I mean, is she a heel in real life? Do we boo her for that? Is that me just being overly analytical? Do you think people
Yeah, I
cared?
think it's over analytical. I think the guy gets blamed a lot more than the woman. We take the blame for everything, right? We're wrong all the time.
No, I know, but they're mostly men in the crowd, so they're going to automatically, take the side of the man, I guess, in that sense. I mean, it's the
I
same with Britt Baker and Adam Cole again, I
well, I'll
suppose.
tell you this. I guess what I'm considered to be is the viewpoint of a casual fan. Like I would never watch the product if we weren't doing shows. Admittedly, I catch up on things, but I don't follow every single thing. I'm just saying, I'm the closest thing to somebody that might have watched the Royal Rumble and maybe tuned in the Raw the next day or had tickets to bring their family, which, by the way, I mean, I heard the Rumble, somebody who does a podcast that came up in my like YouTube Shorts feed. It was like, I'm a wrestling fan. I live in the area. I love wrestling. I would love to go see it live, but I'm not paying $1,000 for my wife, myself, and 2 kids to sit in the nosebleed seats. So there's that as well. But there might have been people that want the both and not known about that. See, I'm just pointing it out like, are people really that in tune with something from TMZ and they're going to a wrestling show? And I didn't even know that it was last summer. I thought it just happened. So you, unless that crowd was a hardcore smart mark crowd that just wanted to like after WrestleMania, Now after the Royal Rumble, after pay-per-view, you're gonna have the super smart fans maybe try to hijack the show and do their chants and the singing and all that stuff. I mean, but we're still in the Midwest, which I don't know if they're so deeply in tune to that personal stuff.
Well, I think to a point you have to be if you're going to spend that much money on them. But
But
anyway,
I
that
I
being
just spent
said,
$1,000 on tickets. Let's see if this woman got divorced. Let me
no,
go
I mean
search.
you've got to be really into the product to actually spend that much. I mean, for the most part. But I mean, the thing is, we're too in the bubble, or at least I am. I mean, I sort of have to be because I've got to sort of keep up with all this news. But there you go. I mean, who knows? Who knows what people really knew or if it mattered at all? But Charlotte's probably going to be turning bad guy officially. Even if that wasn't on the plans, I suspect that's going to be happening quite soon.
It would be the smartest thing to do right now, take the path of least resistance because you have Rhea Ripley. She's obviously gonna get cheered. So what are you gonna do, a part 2 and then be a proud mama when she beats you or whatever? I don't know.
Right, then we're going to move on. What went wrong? There's two of them from the Royal Rumble. These are going to be two fairly short what went wrongs that you're going to analyse for us. And the first one is the foot stomp, the curb stomp, that ended up being a double foot stomp. Seth Rollins on Roman Reigns. So over to you, Stevie. What went wrong?
All right, thank you, James, and I did see this during the Royal Rumble, and I would say, just my guess before we even play it straight through, that Seth Rollins does the curb stomp with his right foot. In this case, when Roman Reigns, he did it with his left foot, and I saw some footage when he was coming backstage, man, his, cheekbone was kind of talking about Roman Reigns, his cheek he ate that mat on the outside, so let's play this. By the way, I really do love this right here. This is what the Royal Rumble is all about. If you're not winning the Royal Rumble, you need to either start or further an angle, storyline, future match, whatever it is. This is planting the seeds or continuing something that is going on, a continuing storyline, which was started with some kind of bargain or deal between CM Punk, Paul Heyman, and Roman Reigns, which we're still not sure what that is, but at least they're still planting seeds of something is going on between these two right here. This here could very well be a WrestleMania match. Maybe a main event, maybe not, who knows? But let's take a look at this right here. Boom. Oh, jeez. Let's back that up. Ooh, that was a curb stomp also on his wrist. That is a double. Double, double right there. Double trouble. Hey, by the way, does this ticker look familiar? Chris sent me a message right away. He goes, this ticker looks familiar. I go, great work. You made it to big time, buddy. Yep. He, this is where I don't know if he thought he didn't have enough room here to separate, but if you're right-handed or right foot and you're expected to do something with the left, you're obviously going to have an issue with that. So play it slow-mo from here. Oh, man. That's Yeah, we don't care. He'll be fine. Can't grieve forever. Start fighting. So we have another angle here with the double foot stomp, or is a single. This is the
This is the
difference.
single one where he overcompensates and does the lightest one possible.
No, that one looked good
You
though.
can,
It might have seemed light because he crunched him on the first one. So, but this is good. I still think it was a good. What are you going to do? You're going to curb stomp him through the stage? You heartless bastard. Let me start off with that. You are. I'm pointing right at you, brother. You.
is there any chance that Roman said just do it with both feet? Because it looked great.
Is there any chance?
Hmm.
When I'm looking at this, ring positioning. We also have a new playbook app that we're going to do ring positioning when people are in the ring right here. It's not really a good translation. I think Seth, this is just my guess. Two other things could have happened, but they had to take what they were given with this. They couldn't do the Hot Wheels feet in this way. I think Roman was supposed to be here, Punk was supposed to be here, and Seth comes and gives the right footed curb stomp. You can't predict how people are going to land and interact, and you're going to turn around. So these workers here are looking, and Seth is looking, going, okay, I got to kind of figure this out, what's going on, because Seth could either be here or these two guys are here and Seth is back here in order to do the curves. I would have rather had that happen. Think about it. So right here, I think the curb stop would have been more sudden and out of nowhere if Seth Rollins came from off camera back here. Do you agree with that? If he wasn't standing here, if whatever.
Yeah, but then Roman would have to be the opposite way, looking the opposite way as well, which is what you
No, he
suggested.
wouldn't be. If he's coming this way, the right foot would stomp him, like he did here on the stairs. He came from.
Yeah, but but Roman's on his side, facing him. I mean, he really needs to be sort of attacked from behind for this, doesn't he? Or at least angled towards the floor, because how's he going to sort of, unless he unnaturally flips himself into like a press-up position from that angle? I think he really needs to be. Everyone needs to be on the other side then.
Well, I'm just giving, like, if Seth had come out of nowhere and hit it, once he sees him, Roman goes into full push-up mode. He's looking at Punk. So the fact that he comes off camera doesn't mean that Roman saw him. If anything, Punk should see him right here, which he does, lets it happen. Maybe that's a storyline thing. But when that happens, what would I rather? Look, he just turned his head down. So he could do the same exact thing and look right down for the curb stomp. So if you're saying he didn't see him, he totally saw him out of the corner of his eye. So you see how little this head turn right here.
Do you think Punk gave him any cues other than just moving back slightly to say that Seth was coming for him?
Did he mouth something?
Did he mouse something? Did he give some sort of hand signal that we can't see?
I think he mouthed some. Look. You see that little ready or whatever, or go, Punk did something here. He's looking at him. That right there. You see his mouth move a little bit? That could have been it right there.
Maybe now,
Here he comes. So once Punk says that, let's go right to here. Get as much as we can. There's some Iggy here because I can't see Roman, unless he has great peripheral vision, seeing Rollins do that. I don't think Roman was saying, maybe they had planned to go out a different way where Seth was on the other side or Roman was against the apron and could take the stomp there. And, because that would make a little bit of sense too, because if Punk was here, Seth does the stomp to Roman by the apron, they can spill out over the announce table and start brawling. You know what I mean? Or spill out somewhere else and brawl there. I think it's what went wrong, but when you have workers that just need to do what cards they're given and the position they're given, they couldn't do anything else. Now, he stomped him pretty good with the double. I would say this here, when he did it to Roman, is perfect. And here's another thing. What if, just in hindsight, Roman and Punk are fighting up here? You know how you fight you're fighting each other, facing each other towards the turnbuckle and punching. And Rollins gets up like he's going to do like a double superplex Falcon's arrow, whatever it is, off the top there. And somebody spills all three of them out to a degree. Then you have Punk here, Roman here, Seth is somewhere, and Seth can literally double stomp both of them onto the stairs and walk off. I think that would have had a lot of impact of, well, he hates Punk, but why did he do it to Roman Reigns too? You leave with questions that Seth could answer the next night on Raw instead of telling Sami Zayn he's better than everybody. And, you would have had something interesting with this guy right here. 2 stomps means the first stomp wasn't what they didn't look good enough, so he did it again. It's the old, let's go right back to the same move and do it again. Did you get that feeling?
Well, can you go back to the first one again?
Sure.
I was even wondering, did his foot get caught up in Roman's hair or something? Or was it just a complete, because he's doing on the opposite
He didn't
side?
split his feet and put the right foot down wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really strange.
But he does land on Roman's wrist,
No, he didn't.
as you.
No, he didn't. His foot is just not wide. He didn't land on his hair. He didn't touch his hair with that right foot at all.
Well, it might have been the plan then.
To do it left
Because
footed.
he sort of he does slip off, so I'm wondering if he just thought, let me just give you a double foot stomp. I will slip off your head. You won't feel me. But then he ends up landing on his wrist instead.
You won't feel me because I'm not getting curve stomped and then a hard mat that's tautly like taped up and everything. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't feel a thing either if I was Seth Rollins.
Okay, then let's move on to the second of our two what went wrongs then, and this one is the Penta elimination. Now, apparently there was some real hot debate going on Twitter whether he was eliminated or not, which I found absolutely fascinating because I thought the answer was clear. But let's go to you. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. First and foremost, I think the Penta fans, based on a previous video, might have had some effigies or voodoo dolls they were sticking into my lower spine. And thank you again, because if I go back in the hospital, Black Widow, James, it's you and the fans' fault. I will blame the fans like a true heel. So here we go. And I think the start, by the way, Penta versus Rey Mysterio, 1 and 2 in the Royal Rumble, loved it. Loved it. We got a taste of what it might be like to have these two guys wrestle each other. Now, I feel like they were kind of rushing because it wasn't going to be their focus entirely. They had the first however many minutes until number 3 came out. But I love what WWE was trying to do and the fact that Penta continues to have what would be considered, even though I don't agree with the 50-50 booking his first 3 matches on Raw, this here is a great way. And dare I say it, what if Penta debuted at the Rumble after vignettes and stuff like that, and we got to see him and Ray right off the bat? That would have been cool. But this wouldn't have been a great first impression, though. Like your feet touching the floor.
Well, I was going to say the Royal Rumble. I mean, can you think of any other Royal Rumble that started with so many botches? Because there was Rey Mysterio who just fell off the top rope, completely, unaided, nothing to do with Penta. And then when Chad Gable got in, I can't remember who did like a massive moonsault on them, or I can't remember what it was. But instead of landing on his body, they landed flush on his knees.
I see. This is the thing. You already forget these moments, and somebody could get really hurt, and they're not really that memorable. So,
yeah, he was down for a couple of minutes. But anyway, I'm sorry. So the Penta elimination or not elimination, according to you?
What do you think?
Yes, he was eliminated.
He did a little toe tap, but you can see that toe make contact, and that boot folds a little bit right there. He was eliminated. This is a dangerous thing no matter what. And they actually, I'll say this too, as the match goes on, I wonder how many accidental eliminations for somebody that spends time going in. You know what I mean? You get tired and you're expected to skin the cat or to tease going out, or, Logan Paul did the Kofi spot on the table and jumping off. And that timing was weird with AJ. Like that was kind of what went wrong in itself, because it looked like AJ was waiting to get eliminated by Logan Paul instead of coming back to it or doing. If I was Logan Paul, I would have grabbed the headset and started commentating from there and had somebody jump out and start fighting on the table with me. It would have been pretty cool. That LA Knight would have been good, even though there's a whole bunch of heat with that. Your Drew McIntyre video talks about that. I'm going off a little bit, but it would have been great if he did that. LA Knight ended up on the table, they both grabbed headsets and started fighting on the table, and eliminated each other off the table. But get back to Penta. I'm trying to avoid it because I don't want to get any more heat. Let's go slow over right there.
There have actually been like accidental eliminations, and they've called it them as. I'm sure one of them's like Kofi Kingston, where it just didn't work out for whatever he was doing, and they just went, "Well, you're out. See ya." And then they just sort of just got over it. But he's done so many spectacular eliminations. I can't remember which one was which, but they've done a couple where they were trying to be a bit too cute, a bit too elaborate. And then there was also Mil Mascaras, who's still in the Royal Rumble from '97.
You got to tell me about this. He did not go out voluntarily. He has never been eliminated. That's right.
He's never been eliminated. No. He went through the middle rope and then climbed on the top rope to do a dive onto the floor. And the referees called it like he was eliminated, and he wasn't.
So Mil Mascaras is owed a WrestleMania title match. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. He can still suck his gut in. Get him back out there. WrestleMania 40, whatever it is.
Do you remember the match he had with Mick Foley when he was Cactus Jack? That was an odd match. Was that a Clash of Champions, I believe, or Slamboree?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was like on one of the Texas border towns or something like that. But then
Corpus Christi,
I think the story
Corpus Christi, Texas, I believe.
Yeah, Kevin Sullivan came up with the finish where obviously Cactus would be losing. And then they said, well, why don't you go and brawl with the band? Because they had a house band.
Oh, the guy looked like Van
show
Hammer,
as well.
Right? The big line. It was, was it Tyler Mane or somebody else? The guy who played.
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember his name.
Was a pro.
He was a big dude.
He was a big dude with blonde hair, reminding you of a mix between Van Hammer and Tyler Mane from the X-Men movies, but he was UW, or Herb Abrams' UWF gets another mention. Tyler Mane was featured on UWF, but then he was more famously Sabretooth. And he came back in Deadpool and Wolverine and played Sabretooth.
Let me do one more thing about the Royal Rumble eliminations. You know, this famous one, Shawn Michaels, 1995. British Bulldog, he eliminates. He goes over the top rope, and then he's, waving one foot in the air. Apparently, he wasn't meant to have either of his feet on the floor because the 2 feet on the floor rule was never a rule. They made it up on the spot to sort of get Shawn through to winning it.
Wow.
Which I've only heard once or twice, and I can't remember where, but I believe that was an audible. They said, no, both feet must touch the floor. They even had Howard Finkel say at the end of it. But I don't think that was ever a rule before then.
Well, there's two other instances. The one that was done to perfection, I think on purpose, was Brett and Luger leading up to WrestleMania 10 with two matches where Brett ended up losing. Oh, you want to talk about a beautifully booked pay-per-view, but a WrestleMania especially. That WrestleMania 10 at the Garden where Brett and Owen had a classic. Owen goes over, and you just don't think Brett's going to pull it out. Brett wins the title. And then the Luger thing, who everybody had Lex Express literally behind him, like Brett jokes, he got run over by the Lex Express. So, you talk about interwoven type things where you really don't know who's going to win and how many guys were made. Either they got over and went over or just got over in that one night was incredible. And that was the Randy Savage Crush thing where he tied him upside down, and great stuff. WrestleMania 10 is an underrated, probably top 5 WrestleManias of all time, if not right in the top 3.
For a future episode, Take a Drink, we need to do the John Cena and Batista Royal Rumble finish.
I was about to say,
where somehow they did the same thing.
I was about to say, should we do it for Patreon or future episode, as you say, Drink Again?
It's amazing, and it wasn't planned.
It wasn't planned, and then the infamous quad blowout thing with Vince.
Just so you know, I've decided right here and right now, because I've already got the assets, we are going to do, not on this show, but we'll do it afterwards. We'll do the Drew McIntyre and the LA Knight thing, because I really want... I'm purely taking a guess. I mean, I know you're taking a guess, but you're taking a guess with decades of experience and, ring positioning and stuff like that. Maybe you can even break out the ring thing on the iPad.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. And I'm interested. You got to go back and watch James's video, because you do give a lot of logical things looking at it that I agree with. And it's got to be, I mean, you're getting 200 and some thousand views right there. And I'll repeat this all the time. You getting 200 and some thousand views. Drew had something to do with that. It means Drew's still interesting. Drew's still over. Drew has a mystique and an anticipation from the fans' viewpoint. And they are doing Drew McIntyre so effing dirty right now with not pushing him. And he's the perfect heel, because he has enough truths to where you want to listen to what he has to say, but he's also a douchebag at the same time, but he's also entertaining and trolls in a way that you keep wanting to come back. I can't explain it. He has the it factor of every category that you want on a TV show, a pay-per-view, a merchandise stand, and especially social media, which these social media numbers, they love them. Why are you not pushing the guy who's owning social media in the past 2 years better than anybody out there?
Now then, Barely Legal. Now, we're not going to be talking about the pay-per-view. That was the original intention of this show, was to talk about the Barely Legal pay-per-view. You even have it on Blu-ray, in fact. And I was struggling to find a fresh copy of it because obviously there's no WWE Network anymore. But that being said, there were so many interesting and controversial moments leading up to the pay-per-view that basically saw the pay-per-view not happen more than once when it was scheduled to. It was actually meant to be in 1996, I believe, or at least, and then the beginning of 1997. Let me give you a couple of things as to why it took so long. We're going to be talking about, obviously, mass transit, the crucifix, other things as well that are problems leading up to it. But the run-up to Barely Legal, a long and winding road with a number of stops and starts, but some of the reasons being ECW's content and some due to complete misunderstandings of what Extreme Championship Wrestling was. And at the time, it's 1996, UFC is still a fairly new phenomenon. 3 years, maybe a tiny bit less, but around the 3-year mark when the pay-per-view was trying to get off the ground. John McCain has just, senator at the time, just successfully almost killed the UFC off, likening it to human cockfighting. And for whatever reason, enough higher-ups at the pay-per-view companies thought that ECW was real, or ECW was some sort of hybrid with pro wrestling and UFC. Something like that. What was your understanding of outsiders thinking what ECW was and maybe having to explain to them what ECW, the true nature of pro wrestling and Extreme Championship Wrestling?
Well, this might be the only time I ever say this on the show, but the pay-per-view executives are smart. They might have been right about that because it sure as hell felt like a mix between pro wrestling and real fighting for me. I can say that down the line. ECW was never understood because we were breaking a lot of stereotypes and barriers and all sorts of other tropes of wrestling, which it needed to evolve anyway. Because obviously, that era of WWE in the early to mid 90s was dark times, nobody making money. Even with Diesel, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, other people, the wrestlers were struggling. The company was struggling and needed to do something. ECW, for good or bad, did change the wrestling business, did change the way people looked at it, and did open up Pandora's box to a universe that could be more creative and more edgy and violent. But then again, it's more edgy and violent, and then you have people that take it too far. And that's kind of where ECW, the biggest strength was also the thing that almost took us off the air on a lot of TV shows, kept us on at 2 a.m., and also lost the pay-per-view virtually or in a simulated fashion multiple times before the eventual barely legal April 13th, 1997. I am not privy to all the occurrences or all the conversations or any of the other things. Like you said, pay-per-view executives, television network executives. I know we were pulled off stations. That was a daily, if not a weekly fight that Paul was always having. But as far as the pay-per-view, I don't even think we really talked. We just tried to get through. I think Kevin Nash had talked about this before with WrestleMania. We kind of had the same thing. Man, we just got to fill up this house. We got to fill up the building tomorrow. We got to book for next week. I got to think about these other things of how I'm going to survive financially and working on a job, independent wrestling, whatever it might be. So the talent was very laser focused in the moment and just making that show that you were performing on that night the very best it could be. And the pay-per-view would have been great. We didn't know about like, were we going to get pay-per-view payoffs? Was there going to be bonuses? Is there this, that? We just wanted to like, and of course there were people as time went on. Raven, I think, was the one that said it like, when this pay-per-view happens, we may have opportunities with WCW and WWF. That was the motivation when it became a reality. Like, we have other places where we might start making some real money.
Now, through a letter writing campaign, ECW was carried by a few providers, including Request TV and Premiere, but some, like Viewers Choice and Cablevision, refused to carry the show. And Request TV requested an advanced script of the show and a start time of 9 p.m. rather than 7 p.m, and that blood was kept to a minimum. ECW, blood kept to a minimum. And it sort of was, actually, on the show when you look back on it.
Well, I think with ECW, and this is where people misunderstand or those stereotypes or those tropes happen. If you look at what I've done, even Raven to an extent, because Raven was mainly a storyline based character. When it came time in the angle for him to bleed or myself, we would do that. But it wasn't week in and week out. Like I always use the analogy of we weren't having Taipei death matches like Axel and Ian and different things to up that. The gangsters and whoever they worked were usually in that thing of the hardcore extreme matches. But then you had guys like Shane Douglas, Taz, Too Cold Scorpio. Then of course the luchadors were discovered through ECW. Japanese talent came in. You put Sandman in that. Sandman would bust himself open with a beer can, but he got busted open very little during the actual match. And Sandman was a storyline based character. And here's where I give him credit once again. Dreamer. I'm going to talk about Dreamer. Dreamer was a storyline based character. Dreamer did bleed. Dreamer had to do some things violence wise in order to get himself over. The Singapore Cane thing. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Endeared him to the fans and got him over. And he literally grew up into a man, kind of with those 10 cane shots by Sandman. But you know why each and every one of these people were storyline driven characters that got direction, that had an id, so to say? Raven. Paul was the booker, but think about it. Every name that I mentioned just about, and put the Eliminators in there, the Pit Bulls, the Gangsters, Public Enemy, all these people, when they became true storyline driven characters, Raven was always the central kind of hub for how all these angles kind of spider-webbed out, came back. 911, Bill Alfonso, Todd Gordon, no matter who it was, everything came together and everything separated into his own universe. And that's where, when you said, well, amazingly, they didn't have a whole lot of blood, it wasn't because of Request or Premiere or any of these other places. It was because these storylines and characters finally, and then I became big Stevie Cole. So I diverted into another entertainment based character that people could get behind. But Raven, I believe, with his Memphis education, Florida education, Portland education, and all the territories in between, he brought that to ECW and became a major influence.
I would argue against you partially there, because I think when everyone says that every single match was weapons and blood and blah, blah, blah with ECW, that's not true. But if memory serves me right, even on the Barely Legal show, there's weapons in at least half the matches. There's out-of-the-ring brawls on every single match, basically. There's in-crowd brawling too much as well. I think this is the show with the Shane Douglas and Pitbull match. You know, the I can't remember which Pitbull. I'm sorry, we didn't watch the show in advance because we were doing the pre-show. We're going to watch it for next time.
He wrestled Anthony Pitbull number 2. And that's
yeah, exactly. And then there's a guardrail.
The thing with the neck thing on Gary.
Yeah. Yeah, but then, you know, they're using guardrails and chairs and everything like that. And there's still too many weapons for weapons' sake. I mean, I know obviously with Shane and Pitbull, that was a blood feud where, you know, you'd expect weapons. But then Lance Storm and Rob Van Dam, they have a chair. I mean, it plays into the finish, obviously. I mean, it's famous for how bad the chair shots are in that. But there's still a chair in a match that doesn't really require one. And I think when people knock ECW, they go too far leaning into the hardcore stuff. But ultimately, ECW did way too much hardcore stuff when it wasn't necessary. And the other thing was, there are rules for rules' sake. There are rules so you can break them. But ECW never had rules. And I think, in a way, Paul, booking-wise, painted himself into a corner in that aspect as well. Because what rules are there to break? The only time there was rules was when Bill Alfonso was the troubleshooting referee from the WWF, and he actually enforced the rules, and then he became the biggest heel in the company. But other than that,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, this was a case where it could have went either way. The analogy I will use is AEW. A lot of talent can do whatever they want, and it kind of fosters itself out of control. That's kind of, violence wise, spot wise, same moves, tables in every match, or a chair, or something repeated throughout the show or the pay per view. I agree with that, but I think what we were trying to do was always just give 110% in every match. The intention was sound. The intentions were good, but sometimes you did have to peel us back into that. With that being said, even with all that stuff, the chairs, the tables, the weapons, the blood, the barbed wire, the fire, whatever you call it, they were all involved. Went too far, but it was still part of a storyline. It wasn't, it was weird. Not the actual acts with the weapons, people still understood the storyline. Did we go too far? Yeah, but dare I say it, and this is something Vince McMahon gave me advice on. I'd rather you come out way too much energy and I have to peel you back rather than always forcing you to be excited or intense or any of that stuff. So we probably it was probably good that Paul started listening a little bit more and putting psychology into the wrestling card. Doesn't need to go outside. No. Doesn't need a chair. No. These guys are doing this. And I think the boys policed themselves a bit. We had guys like Shane Taz, and then even guys who did their own thing like New Jack and Mustafa. Why would I come out and hit somebody with a crutch when New Jack's doing it later? The boys started to find who did what and who shouldn't do that. Takes
Yeah.
time.
If in fact that's exactly what I was getting at. 'Cause in the first couple of years, every match from the opening match to the end to the main event was exactly the same. You just have progressively more popular wrestlers doing the same things, if you know what I mean. So what I'm saying is, when you talked and when we talked about doing the show originally, one of the things you wanted to discuss was the psychology of a wrestling card, and I think that's the one thing that Heyman, at least in the beginning, didn't understand at all. He just let everyone do what they wanted to do.
Well, he understood it. He absolutely, with Paulie's pedigree previously as a manager
Mm.
and sitting in on stuff and learning, even as a photographer at the garden and everything, he gained knowledge. He might not know what the knowledge was until he was 10, 15 years after the fact. But no, he understood it. But I think Paul was just doing what we try to do with the show, what we try to do with our own brands, look at the landscape and do the exact opposite of what everybody else is doing, the counterculture. And that's exactly what ECW was. I think Paul may have had a maybe a not a definitive plan, but a skeleton of a blueprint to say, I have to see exactly what point we get to where I have to start peeling it back. But until that time, we got to go for broke because we might not be around next week or next month or next year. Let's just stand out right now and see what happens. Plus he's insane. We all were,
Mm.
and we all still are.
One more thing before we get off Barely Legal. As I say, as I wheeze into the microphone, is it true that Paul Heyman basically put the entire capital, of, including your payoff, of the promotion betting on the success of Barely Legal?
I don't know that for a fact, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that Paul put every dime or put a second mortgage on his mom and dad's house or his house or, put up his car as collateral or anything else to make this work. This is a Vince McMahon thing. Vince McMahon put up his entire financial future on WrestleMania 1. So Paul, I think Paul really believed as long as we can get this pay-per-view to happen and to finish without a transformer exploding, then then yeah, future episode. Then we
Future
yeah,
episode,
then
yeah.
we would be good. But do I yeah, I believe Paul believed enough in it to put up everything he could because if that didn't work, what would Paul do? I mean, we'd probably all go to WWF or WCW. Eventually all of us did, but that's what I think. Like if this just doesn't work, then I'll go back to being a manager, I'll book or do something, but it has to work. And I don't think Paul doubted for a second that we wouldn't deliver and he wouldn't deliver on what we promised.
Now, let's move on to Todd Gordon, one of the one of the most pivotal figures in ECW. I mean, for goodness sake, he bankrolled EC. He is ECW, and he's someone who really doesn't get talked about anywhere near enough in the history of Eastern and Extreme Championship Wrestling. Now, at this time, he is just a figurehead commissioner. I think Paul's either cajoled or bought most of ECW from Todd at this point. I can't remember the full story. That being said, Todd wouldn't be long for ECW after this pay-per-view. He would be ousted or leave the promotion shortly after the fact. As a talent, seeing them interact and anything else rumours you heard at the time and what you know now, do you believe that Todd and Paul Heyman were at odds with each other around this time?
Well, 2020 hindsight and the fact that I'm super close with Todd, I've never asked him that directly, but my assumption or my educated guess would be that, of course, you're always going to have creative visions. I'm sure Todd's vision of some or most was the same as Paul's, but you're not going to have 100% agreement on everything and the direction it should go. And then, of course, Todd is a very sound financial person, runs Card for WWE, been around for well over a century. Paul can be like just a creative genius, but on the financial front, which has been the criticism that he's accepted about the financial part of ECW, he wasn't the greatest person to lead or, have that responsibility. If in a perfect world, if Todd would have stayed around, I don't know how they parted ways, but if Todd would have stayed around and Paul put the financial part of ECW into Todd's lap to be responsible for, I think it would have flourished even more because Todd runs a business, an actual business. And the thing that promoters have been criticized for and will be criticized for forever is the fact that they do not run the wrestling business like an actual business. So I love Todd to death. I think, talk about books. You have 2 books, but Todd has a book as well that I recommend everybody go and read.
Todd is God.
Yeah, Todd is God. And Todd was one of the early people that believed in me when no one else did. And still to this day, love that guy like a brother. He always, on his birthday or Christmas or New Year's or just events like that, I'll text him after this show and say, hey, man, we were talking about you on this episode. I miss you. I love you and hope you're doing well. He's one of the few that reached out to me when I was sick and made sure I was doing okay. He's just a really good dude. And of course, I worked upstairs as Lloyd Van Buren, so I got to see him 5 days a week during the week. He'll sometimes text me, hey, Lloyd Van Buren. So that's the stuff.
Hey, cool. Was the office in W. Carver Reed?
Yeah, above it in the attic. The attic. So those were the Super Fanicom days with Gabe Sapolsky playing Fire Pro. Oh yeah.
Good times. I've met Todd in person as well as interviewed him. He's one of the few people that I thought, damn, that's a really nice dude. Like someone I'd actually spend time with, on purpose. Yeah. So Todd was. Yeah, he left a great impression on me.
He's a smart, disarming, kind, generous gentleman. We all fall short too, by the way. Nobody's perfect, but that should lead you to the next question: how in the world did you end up in this?
I love the fact that the book is called Todd is God due to a ribald story that was told many years ago about, I won't go into it, but Scorpio and whoever else was there.
I didn't read the book yet. I admit only now Todd's
the Cylinder of Sin, I believe is the old hotel.
The travel
that being
lodge. Yes,
the travel lodge. Either way,
the infamous every once in a while a stretcher that the blanket is fully covering someone's body, and you're like, is that one of us? It's, yeah.
It's probably Sandman half the time, and then, he'd kick out. False finish. Right. Todd's creative involvement in ECW. We'll get to the mole story in a minute, because obviously this is around the same time period, but did Todd have any creative input or much creative input in ECW?
That I don't know. I'm assuming if it was a good idea, Paul would do it. Now, obviously, Todd loved Sandman, super tight with Sandman, Scorpio, Fonzie. He was figured in with guys anyway that would, if he had an idea, give it to Sandman for Sandman, and Sandman could pitch it to Paul or just do it. Those are the ways that would go. But no, it was not ruled by committee in the negative sense, but every talent and everybody had anything to do with the company always could have input And Paul would honestly say, he's told me plenty of times, "That is really dumb. Good try, but really dumb." Uh, and, and Todd, he did an interview with my buddy, Ace Darling, and it was so funny because even back in the early '90s, Todd would be the one I would go to because Paulie's kind of a Vince character with those eyes. He can intimidate people pretty easily with his intensity. So I would go to Paul or go to Todd, not go to Paul. And I was like, this is a crazy idea, but and I would always start it with, not what would be cool, but I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out or something. And Todd said that to Ace Darling and laughed. So it made me run. I was, man, I was even doing it back then. And you and Chris get that on a daily basis. Hey, here's an idea. Why don't we do this?
Do we? Oh God, I know.
Sorry.
We've all. I know. We've all. I won't go into it. Right. I was going to say there was it was a technical thing you wanted on screen that me and Chris vetoed, and I think you were quite disappointed.
I'm still mad. The ESPN PTI friggin' overlays, dude. It's going to be so good. I'll do it for Patreon. And you and Chris were like, no, and I'm like, ugh.
I know. Anyway, all right, let's get to the mole story. Now, Todd, in his book, Todd is God. So they were plugging this book for him. I know it came out in 2023, but for goodness sake, it is a really good book as well. I can vouch for that. I've read it. Now, at the time, the mole story. Todd would leave in 1997, and the mole story. Do you want to explain what the mole story is?
If you could, I don't have all the information, but obviously there was rumblings, and there was the old Spider-Man thing where everybody's pointing at everybody. That was going on.
Okay, the basic gist of it is that wrestlers were filtering away to WCW. I mean, Public Enemy was probably like the first big switch over from ECW to WCW at that time. And there was a theory going around in the locker room that somebody was going and talking to people and saying, hey, do you want me to put in a good word for you to WCW? And basically, WCW was poaching talent from ECW. Obviously, some talent would be going to WWF, like Scorpio, in fact, would do it a few months before Barely Legal. But the theory at the time is that Todd Gordon and somewhere along the line, Bill Alfonso were the moles who were facilitating WCW contracts for ECW talent under the nose of Paul Heyman. So is that how you remember it at the time?
That is how I remember it, but looking back on that with 2020 hindsight, once again, Paul Heyman was a mole for WWF. Right? Mm-hmm. He was getting a check every week, and he was communicating with Vince for talent exchanges, right? So he was
he was on the shows. He was on the WWF shows.
No, before that,
promoting
in
Barely Legal.
96, he was doing stuff with them.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, in 96 in Mind Games pay-per-view. And funny, I mentioned that to Dutch, and Dutch remembers that really clearly because they invaded during his match.
Savio Vega
he was managing Bradshaw
with the strap, right?
Yeah.
That was the match. Actually, go back and watch it. That was a great match between Shawn Michaels and Mankind with the go to do the belly to back, but he turns into it and they go through the table. I remember that. Mm-hmm. But
I think the reality of the situation is that Kevin, I don't know if it was Kevin Sullivan, but obviously he had, he knew a lot of people from ECW.
He was in there. Yeah. A lot of talent. Like
and Terry Taylor.
Terry Taylor, and then you had Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson in the early days, wrestled in the ECW. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure about Terry Taylor, but he was figured into the WCW office, and I think he was the guy who was facilitating these contracts from the WCW end.
Yeah, he facilitated mine through Raven and Bischoff.
Yeah.
But with Terry worked one of my first shows in Eastern Championship Wrestling at Michael Jack Sports Bar, and I had met Terry Taylor. So he was connected to Todd or knew Todd from the very first show or second show at Michael Jack Sports Bar. So it's a small world. Everybody knows everybody. So I have no doubt they made a connection. Todd was an independent wrestling promoter. Terry was trying to get indie bookings. I remember when I first met Terry, like this is how it comes full circle, because we don't really talk, especially after last week's episode, I'm sure. But I went up to him and asked him for advice, and he gave me like the cigarette out, looking up at me, no, non-answer, get out of here, kid, or whatever. And then he became one of my staunchest supporters along with Russo and got me my jobs in WWF well, WCW as well, and also TNA. So, yeah, Terry, that might be an Easter egg, kind of unknown little thing that maybe they stayed connected and Terry and Todd continue to talk.
Now, did you ever hear Todd Gordon's version of the mole story and that it wasn't all that it seemed?
I haven't, but here's the thing. Was Paul projecting a little bit since he was the mall for WWF to take any heat or sniff of heat off of him? Todd's the scapegoat. That's what I'm like just guessing right now.
Even more than that, apparently. According to Todd, Todd is God in the book. I implore you all to go and buy that because it's got the full story in there, and it's Todd's version finally public after, goodness me, over 25 years, I guess. But the idea is that because Todd was leaving ECW anyway, that Paul and Todd, or in fact, Paul suggested that Todd be the mole, the scapegoat, the public face of it, or, you know, someone who Paul could tell the boys that it was Todd Gordon. But in actuality, it wasn't Todd Gordon, but it was essentially a ruse to get the locker room back together as an us and them mentality. And then Paul is the hero, he gets rid of the mole, and then the ECW locker room sort of bands together again over that fact, I guess.
Well, I do you even one better. That's leaving a lot of money on the table. Have Todd with coming to get people and become an on-air personality on the show to try to recruit for WCW. Now you have guys that are heels that might want to go. Somebody turns on, and then you take the reality of people are actually leaving to go, and you have a storyline on the way out. And you can bring them back because almost everybody washed out at that time anyway. So you came back to ECW. I think you could have years of storyline with that and really maximize Todd instead of literally, they you have to you have to, die the hero or live long enough to become the villain, and that's what I guess Paulie wanted to see Todd be. What a weird way to, like, y my locker room's fractured, but I'm sending guys to WWF, but I want you to take the heat for all this, and then we'll get back together, but we're all gonna hate you. How does that sound good
Hmm.
for Todd in any way?
I don't know. He seemed to agree to it at the time, according to his
I
book,
think
Todd is
Todd
God.
I think
Very
Todd
brief.
assumed that it would have led, it's my assumption and guess, it would have led to an on-air angle. Why why wouldn't it? All Paulie was trying to do, I think, was really just getting the heat off himself. That's it.
Yeah. Bill Alfonso as one of the moles or one of the facilitators. Did you have any first or third hand or second hand experience hearing about this at the time that Fonzie or Todd Gordon were helping facilitate contracts to WCW at the time?
No, and actually Fonzie, that's a name that I never heard until this day right now. I
Mhm.
never heard the Fonzie.
Yep.
I mean, I just said Todd and Fonzie were super tight. So, all that stuff. But also you're looking at Sandman and these other people. And here's Todd's. If Todd really was this person that could facilitate this, let's just say Todd was really the mall. He's working without Paul's knowledge and trying to do this. Wouldn't you want the people you love and care about as brothers to make the most amount of money that they can make? And knowing that they're putting their bodies on the line and you know them, you know their families, wouldn't you want to get them a deal where they can make that great money?
Mm-hmm.
And you're the heel.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to
Hey,
ECW, everybody.
the promoters were damn good at making themselves the babyface, weren't
Ooh,
they?
they still are today, if you think about it.
Okay, then. So we're going to, once again, we're talking about Barely Legal, but we're talking about the run up to it and the initial incident that actually postponed the pay per view for something like 6 months was a little something called the mass transit incident. Do you want me to set up any of the information here, or
Yeah, for
or do
anybody.
you want to do? Or we actually just watched it, in
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
for
If you're on
Patreon.
Patreon, check it out. But we're going to go into detail of this, just not watch along style. But please still go to Patreon. How's that? James has a new YouTube channel he needs to fund. And
I do.
supposedly I'm hoarding gym equipment. No, no. But
You are. You send me photos of gym equipment, even when it's the wrong stuff.
if you live near me, you would be the beneficiary of all that stuff. So we'll get back
I
to this.
know.
Mass transit.
Oh no, I'm encouraging you. Don't worry.
Now, for people that don't know, for anybody who's just tuning in, they might not, this is so far removed. We're talking 28 years now from that
Mhm.
time. So give I guess, the mass transit incident 101 to everybody, and then I'll give my backstage because I witnessed stuff pre, post a little bit. I was a little bit in shock because I've never seen anything like that. But I was in the locker room when this kid came in and certain things that had happened. But give everybody the 101 on this, and then I'll pick it up from there.
Right then. So,
Please, I wasn't
what was
ordering
it?
you. Please, you're the
Oh, no, no,
boss.
no. What was the place? Dog Track. What was the dog track
Oh,
called?
you
Where this
love it.
was?
Wonderland. Wonderland
Yeah, the
Greyhound.
Wonderland Dog Track.
Wonderland Greyhound
Anyway,
Dog Track in Revere, Massachusetts.
there we go. So, a young man, very young man, called Eric Koulis, and his father basically just wander into the locker room and go up to Paul Heyman and just say, "My son's a wrestler. He was trained by Killer Kowalski," which, that's the first lie. He wasn't. He wasn't trained at all. And the second one was, he's 21 years old. Can he be on the card?
I'm going to stop you right
And
there.
he wasn't.
I have to stop you right there. I just watched the Shane thing, so I was a little more fresh in my memory. Shane said that he, Paul, and Taz were sitting at a card table where he usually wrote out the card in the book,
Yeah.
booked the show. They said he came up to him very quietly, introduced himself, said he wanted to, actually, I back up. He had a small wrestler with him. I don't know if we can say the actual M word, but a
Was it,
tiny wrestler.
what was he called? Tiny. What was he called? Tiny the Terrible
Yes,
or something?
that guy there,
Yes.
which I stay far away from. They usually mean to me, so I stay far away from
Yeah.
him.
They're ornery. If you watch Wolf of Wall Street, that's the theory.
But Short Sleeve Samson was a very nice guy. He was the only one I met that was halfway nice and played video games, I think. But Tiny the Terrible, I'm going off of your name. He was the one that vouched for mass transit and said, "Can you get my friend onto the show?" And then they asked him the question, "Who trained you, or how long you been working?" Did they ask him how long No, I think they asked. I think he said he was working 2 years, and he was trained by Killer Kowalski. That's what I believe. How long you been working? It's usually the first thing. How long you been working? I think he said 2 years, trained by Killer Kowalski, and said he was 19 years old. That's the Shane story that he had. Now,
Mhm.
did he walk in and say that to somebody else, the father? "Hey, is there anybody who can get my son booked on the show?" It wouldn't have He wouldn't have got past, like, inside the locker room. Taz or Perry or somebody, whoever there, plenty of guys would have threw him out. So I don't know if that part's true, but if a known wrestler like Tiny the Terrible came in with him and people knew him, he could slide by and get the Paul, get the Shane, get the Taz, and pitch to get himself on the show.
Yeah, well, that's exactly my point. I know so many wrestlers over the years were just desperate to get a shot in ECW and Paul wouldn't give them the time of day. But then some kid just turns up and says, "Hey, can you fit me on the card?"
Mhm.
And Paul goes, "Yeah, we'll put you in with the gangsters." And Devon, not only just on the card, they'll put him with established stars on the ECW
The
roster.
tag champs,
Was
right?
it just that
The
easy?
tag team champions.
Yeah, the tag
Yeah.
champs. Was it just that easy to get on an ECW card back in the day?
No, because I showed up on my bags many, many times, and I would just hope to get choke slammed by 911 10 times or more during the show, or come in, and this is coming in to, like, do a pull apart, and he snatches people and choke slams them, or what was the guy's name? Dino Sendoff, which was basically Paul ripped Dino Santa, who was the independent promoter we talked about early in my career from WWW. My God, I have key with that name all, still to this day. Too many W's. So maybe he knew the internet was going to be big one day. but I talked with him and a couple other Donnie Allen, other people where 911. But dude, that was my hope. I didn't get that every night or every week, but I showed up with my bags and just waited around and tried to keep my mouth shut and tried to stay out of the way. So this here already a red flag to some degree. So I don't know if they did get to the locker room and stuff happened, and then they got the Paul and Paul got the Iggy. Yeah, let's put him in with New Jack. That's my, once again, educated guess. Now, as far as a timeline thing, if I could tell this story, a timeline, I know we're going to give the one-on-one, but we're kind of giving more context. I remember this kid, at least with my memory and what's left of it, he was in the locker room. He sat down not far from Taz, not right next to him, but no more than 3 to 4 chairs away, which is still pretty close, where we dressed at the dog track. You want me to say the name Wonderland? You love that.
Please. Because I misheard it and I thought you said dog crack. I was like, man, that sounds rough.
Yeah. Well,
Yet completely in keeping with ECW somehow.
yeah. I mean, with the neighborhood, there could have been a lot of crack going around. Who knows? So, but he did sit down. He did not introduce himself to everybody, which is a big no-no. Even if you're known, I knew early on, shake everybody's hand, do whatever, no matter what if you get the Billy Gunn reaction, just do it. And we'll talk about it. We talked about it on Patreon. So with that being said, take a drink. This kid sits down, gets very, very comfortable. And I swear, I would not have remembered this if it wasn't true. He lit a cigarette and started smoking. And Taz was total health nut. All that. It's like much less like you're brand new. Nobody knows you. You didn't introduce yourself to anybody. And not only do you take a chair, which the Dean Malenko story from way back, even if the chairs are all open, it's a trap, just like Star Wars. Don't sit in a chair until you know everybody sat down. And then maybe still, I know in this day and age, it sounds very draconian, very medieval, very barbarian type, behavior, caveman type behavior. But these were the rules in a wrestling locker room. So he sits down, gets comfortable, and lights a cigarette. Right there. Now, Taz was also sitting here with Shane and Paul. So my guess would be this happened before the fact. Taz went to the table, rightfully clued Paulie in that, who is this kid? Then for some reason the kid, or maybe Paul says, go get the kid and bring him to me. How did he get from the locker room to back there in a booking thing where even I was working the show and I didn't even know that they were doing that? There's some holes that have to be filled in. And all I'm doing here is just trying to guess the timeline of how it happened up to that point. But the way I'm putting it kind of makes it make sense that he just didn't throw him out there to do that there was some provocation for this kid to be put in that spot. Was it right that it happened? Absolutely not. But something had to lead up to Paul putting him in that match.
And the match would be Devon Dudley, a mass trans. He looks like a bus conductor as well. But just before we actually get to that,
type of thing from back in the day.
I don't understand the reference. I'm sorry.
Bring up a picture. Chris, B-roll picture of Ralph Cramden with mass transit split screen because he did look like Ralph Cramden. You young whippersnappers don't know the honey.
What can I say? He was a big old unit.
To the moon. You don't know that either, but that's okay.
No, I don't.
He was.
I'm sure most people are screaming at me, I'm sure.
1950s and 60s TV. His wife, was her name Alice? His wife would get him so mad that he threatened to punch her and beat her up. So that was a sitcom, a comedy.
The old times, eh? Never mind. I'm sure it doesn't matter. That being said, another take a drink. I said this on the Patreon very briefly. I didn't really flesh it out, but what kind of father allows their son, who is underage, to wrestle on a really violent wrestling promotion? It's obvious it's really violent. It's obvious you can get really hurt, and it's not obvious that you're going to be put in quote unquote a comedy match like it was on Inside Edition. We also watched on Patreon the news reports after the fact. But what kind of dad sort of like vouches for their underage son, and then, hey, you've got no training, just pretend you've got training. Off you go. And it's like, I don't understand the thought process of that at all.
Do you think the father was not lied to by Eric? That he was trained? Or maybe the father was...
If he'd been wrestling for 2 years, he would have started at 15. He must have known that his kid was not going to wrestling training, or he paid thousands of dollars, or that he was doing shows every weekend like he claimed. No way.
Well,
I think he was complicit in the lie.
about his father coming in and doing that, I don't know, because all I saw was the kid sit down alone. I didn't even
Mm.
people are gonna make a joke. I didn't even see Tiny and Terrible, but he might have been there. He might have been there. I didn't even see him. So, he was the original John Cena. So, but
Aha.
Oh, geez,
You've got to get
I'm
it in.
sorry, my wife. Oh my God, please. See, we're in the ring. But I'm gonna call him Eric, and the mass transit is wrestling, but what Eric came in and did, any normal excited kid would do, not the smoking or anything, but you want to be a wrestler, you want to do and you want to do anything you can. For all we know, this kid, because I believe there was other people, and I'm not speaking, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I remember a story of people like Steve Bradley, who was up in that Massachusetts area, an incredible worker, may have lied about his age to get in the wrestling school. Lots
Mm.
of people have lied. Jake Roberts lied that he could work. Terry Taylor lied that he could work, and they put him in the ring with somebody, and that's how he learned how to work. I'm not saying,
Yeah, and do you know who else lied? Chuck Austin.
oh,
He
really?
lied. Yeah, he told them that he was doing well in wrestling school, blah blah blah. He knew how to take a rocker dropper, trying to be like the big man. He didn't know anything. He'd only done like a week or two, and guess what? He didn't know how to take a flat forward bump. He ends up taking it like a DDT and ends up getting paralyzed. I understand why people lie to get on wrestling shows because they're an idiot, I guess. At that point, or at least you can lie about your experience to a point. Yeah, but you can lie about your experience to a point. But the point is that if you have absolutely no experience and you're just lying to get on a show, you're liable to something. I'm not saying you deserve everything you get, but I mean, he didn't. Eric Kulis didn't deserve to have his head sliced open. But you're letting yourself in for some real serious harm, like Chuck Austin, at the same time, and then like Eric Kulis' father being sort of complicit in this lie as well. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's a part of the story and a part of the entire urban legend that I couldn't give you any information on. But yeah, when you look at it, was his father just such a supportive father that he was willing to enable his son? And
I mean, maybe, but it's like
I can't see him wanting to put his son in that situation. I think his father was not caught up to speed on the current state of pro wrestling. He might have watched Hulk Hogan and Bruno, and it looked easy, and maybe he had the same thing. This is so easy, it's stupid and fake, anybody can do it. It could be that willful ignorance of what the business really takes to make it in the business, which you don't even know, even after you take your bumps in wrestling school, when you get live rounds and every day, every match, every second that you spend in the business is a positive and a learning experience or a negative learning experience as well, maybe at once. So I'm looking at that, but yeah, the kid, Eric, he put himself and he actually put everybody around him in unnecessary danger. Now, I'm not talking about New Jack, but what if it was a regular wrestling match and he said, like, say Taz, okay, hey, can you get over on a T-bone suplex? And he doesn't even know what a T-bone suplex is. And Taz, even with his incredible low center of gravity, hip strength, all that stuff, judo experience, the kid can't get over, lands on Taz's head. Taz breaks his neck. Now what happens? All because you lied. And I've been there. Like, here's the lie that every wrestler tells. That finish one, that's sketchy. You know what I mean? I'm at a point, I got to a point where I'm like, if I don't take it well, it's not going to make you look good. I could politically get myself out of it. The only lie you should tell as a pro wrestler is this. Are you a babyface or a heel? I could be both. I could be the best, like Scott Hall. I can be the best G.I. Joe you'll ever see. Or I can be the best heel. That's the only lie that's kind of acceptable, where you can go in and kind of fake it till you make it. Anything physical, you can't do it, because 9 out of 10 times, the other guy's going to get hurt because you don't know what you're doing. But he does not deserve it, but it could have been, would we have this story if he broke Taz's neck by not taking a T-bone suplex right? Could have went either way.
So before we get to the ring, the match itself is the Gangsters versus Devon Dudley and Mass Transit. When Do you think, I don't know if you have any first-hand knowledge, but when did New Jack get wind of this kid in the locker room? And also, yeah, you were saying, I don't know if you were saying off air on the Patreon, and it was said by other people as well that he was acting really obnoxious, and, you know, obviously you said not shaking hands, making himself a bit too comfortable, that kind of thing. But when did New Jack get wind of he was going to be working with mass transit?
Well, there's such tight quarters when you're dressing. I would assume everybody got wind of his behavior in that circle, in that hallway, whatever we were dressing at. And of course, it might not have been New Jack getting wind of it, but New Jack basically saying, okay, I'll take care of this. And maybe he went to Paul and said, put him in a match. And there was a spot from what I understand, because it's weird. Devon not tagging up with Bubba. What's going on? I don't know the backstory of why Devon, what, or Bubba wasn't there, or any Dudleys. There was a ton of Dudleys. This was Sign Guy, Spike. I think Dances with was no Dances with. I think was gone by '96 when this happened. Correct?
Yeah, wasn't that the Dudley that
Dances with Dudley and New
New
Jack,
Jack had a
Jim
fight
Thorpe.
with?
They almost, whole
Yeah.
thing, because we had the locker room off the side of the mountain on stilts, and they were fighting
Mhm.
through there. Um, and I was BWO, I was big Stevie Cole. I think I was working on little Guido on this show. So this was definitely in the early stages of the BWO and late '96, early '97, because we debuted November to Remember 1996, and then the pay-per-view was '97. It's hard in wrestling, these timelines, like, you're like, "Man, that was only, like," that was only, like, 5, 6 months or whatever or less between that and the pay-per-view. I was like, "Yeah, a lot of stuff happened."
Now then, do you know, in fact, because we talked about this beforehand, that at some point, Eric Koulis is told that he needs to bleed in the match. And he asks, or New Jack volunteers, to cut him. And you've said this before, that's the absolute worst thing you can do, is let somebody else cut you, especially New Jack, who is already unhappy with your behaviour. So that sort of leads up to the match itself. Very, very quickly, there's a brawl. As I say, we watched the entire match on Patreon, step for step. And there's a brawl, and then Devon Dudley is sort of taken out of the ring quite quickly, which I think we noted at the time, and I think we noted that was definitely on purpose. In fact, New Jack himself was the one who paired up with Devon at the beginning, and I said, why was that, Steve? And you said something to the effect of either lull them into a full sense of security, or basically New Jack is telling Devon what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that, and basically Devon says during that thing with Maven that he was told to stay out of the ring, and obviously you have to kind of keep trying to come back in the ring. You can't just die. But that was Mustafa keeping him out of the ring to at least keep whatever appearance up. But yeah, I've been in there before, and I've been, part of something like that where people have done it to me to rough me up. They put me in like a secure position where I'm like, oh, this because I said before, usually in wrestling, if somebody has it out for you, in this case, it happened instantly, but in most cases, not today, not tomorrow, not next month, maybe not even next year, but I'm gonna get you. And that whole anticipation of when am I gonna get it is the torture, to get you thinking about it all the time. With this, they basically had New Jack pair off with Devon and Mustafa with Eric, and then they switched it up, and then it all went to where we saw it went.
Yeah. Okay, then. So Devon's gone, and then the gangsters are in with mass transit. Sort of 2-on-1 for the rest of the match. Weapons are thrown, including a toaster, and then it happens. So,
And there's a crutch shot
what do you
before
think that
that. The crutch and the toaster,
Yeah.
they're there no matter what. Dare I say, like if they, they said in the news stories, got hit with a toaster. I don't even know if they brought up the crutch. They showed it. That's I got hit with that stuff too. Everybody did, and then it became staple guns and things like that, and the guitar shot, and things. That what was the other one? The hockey stick between between your legs. So that's standard fare. But then, yeah, whatever New Jack had, like a little sickle or a scalpel or
Mm.
whatever it was, man, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was said at the time an X-Acto knife.
like a box cutter.
Yeah, something like that. And he slices up mass transit Eric Coulis's head more than once as well. We're not going to be showing this on the B-roll, obviously, for YouTube standards and just good taste, quite frankly. If you want to watch the whole thing of and Stevie wincing at watching it as well. At one point, after he's cut several times, and then the camera, it's actually very good fan cam footage for what it is. Zooms straight into Eric Coulis's head, and that is pouring projectile bleeding. I mean, it's cutting right in the middle of the forehead. I mean, it's a terrible sight to see. Do we want to talk about what's actually happened there, or should we talk about afterwards and the reaction? And I mean, just viscerally, straight away, what do you think of New Jack's actions?
Well, I was in shock. Not as much shock as Eric was for taking the actual physical violence, but like I said, I never saw anything like that before, and I really haven't seen anything like that since. To that degree, I see people get roughed up in the ring, or hey, watch this. We're going to teach this kid a lesson and do these types of things. And that could have been what people, I guess, the rumblings in the locker room was. This kid's getting the ring. Like anybody, this proves like the kid wasn't mature to begin with, no matter what age. He had no self awareness of the situation. He was just a kid. I'm sure New Jack wasn't being buddy buddy with him and I'll take care of you and don't. New Jack was sending signs out like, I'm going to get you. And if you're around him enough, or if you're around anybody that has that aura around them, you know when you're literally in danger, that something's not right. So right off the bat, the kid's lack of self-awareness, maturity, all these things, I wish he had more, and I wish he was smart enough to back out of the match, knowing that he wasn't ready. Not even the box cutter, the toaster, the crutches, or even New Jack just roughing him up. Just knowing I'm a 17-year-old kid. They're throwing me in with the tag champs. I'm not in an opening match or just taking one choke slam or something. This is too much. I'm in too deep. He's going to drown in the deep end. But he didn't do that. He went out there. But I think the rumblings in the locker room, from what I can remember, was New Jack's going to teach the kid a lesson, teach him some respect, do whatever the people were talking about or whatever. And we just might have thought that New Jack was going to club him a little bit, hit him with the weapons, throw his ass out, literally out of the Wonderland dog crack, as I would earlier say. But we were just like, get your bags, and maybe throw his bags out the locker room, out the door, and say, don't even bother coming to the locker room. That would have been the best result. Just roughing him up, teach him a lesson, hopefully giving him something that says, yeah, I need to be trained properly. I need to be in shape, whatever. And that's what most young wrestlers, they get taught that lesson, including myself, over and over again. Like, yeah, you're not as good as you think. You're not as experienced. Even being in the ring with Shayna in the ECW, there were times, and this is off topic, but the same thing. Shane tested me. Sabu tested me. Taz tested me. Raven tested me to tag up with him. The Pitbulls did. The Eliminators. Like, you're getting tested and you need to pass or fail. And it's pretty apparent which way it could go. Getting back to Eric, this here, what happened was beyond the scope of anything I think that anyone expected outside of New Jack. Devon in the video said, I knew something bad was going to happen. But I think even Devon could have never guessed that was what was going to happen. You know, we weren't even in the staple gun era of New Jack and the Gangsters, or New Jack as a singles wrestler. So this thing was just, even for ECW, our reputation and the kind of violence you think we were desensitized to, I think many in the locker room, including Shane, who spoke on this, were like, ooh, this is beyond the pale of anything.
Was it a curtain sellout?
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I was at the curtain. Meanie was at the curtain. Paul was at the curtain. And I think Nova even came to the curtain, or news. When Paul's watching it through the curtain, something's going to happen. And once again, we did not know that was going to happen. I don't even think, but Paul couldn't have known that something that like violent was going to happen to this kid. And mind you, we're still thinking he's a 2 years trained as a wrestler, and 19 years old. The underage part and not being trained was we were taking the kid and, Tiny the Terrible. So, why would I lie? Yeah, that's one of my defense mechanisms. Like, I was trying to make a joke or trying to laugh during that thing, but it was incredibly shocking. And then if you ask me what Paul's reaction was to when it was happening, we didn't really know because it wasn't a big WWE monitor with the fan cam footage zoomed in. We could only see down the aisle in the sea of people that were standing up. That in
Mm.
that zoom in, dude, they're lucky, so lucky that Eric admitted that he volunteered to be, because we're getting into that part next, that he volunteered to be cut by New Jack and plead, because that zoom in by the fan cam was the most incriminating part, in my estimation, after the fact, if he didn't get on the stand and kind of close the case himself.
There is more fan cam footage after the fact. After the cut, the match continues. New Jack does a flying chair, sort of not even a splash, but just like drives it into his head as hard as he can from the top
I took
rope.
it and Meanie took it. We're back to standard New Jack. He would do that as a finish.
Mm.
They,
But then New Jack then gets on the house mic and says, I'll clean it up. I don't care if he bleeds to death here while his father is screaming, he's only 17, he's only 17. At the same time, so all this would play into news reports, including on Inside Edition. There's a clip out there on Daily Motion, not YouTube, where that sort of goes on more and more in depth. And then there's also the court case that happens a few years later, including, we'll use his real name for it, Jerome Young, New Jack, and there's a bit where the reporter tries to get some comments from him, and he will not speak to him, other than to say, I think the reporter says, when are you going to speak? And he says, at the trial. And that's it. So at least he got some good advice not to talk to reporters or anyone else.
yeah, I said my reaction during that watch along was that was like really, really smart to not say a word. And if you are going to say something, you'll have your day in court and find it all out there. Because if he had said something, even with Eric testifying and New Jack said the wrong thing, almost like admitting or saying, I don't care about him. I hope, like you said in the promo, if he continued that, it might have went a different way for everybody, including the pay-per-view and ECW in general. What a bang. I mean, I don't know. Were they suing him personally and ECW? That's what I wasn't clear on. Both.
They probably, yeah, they always do. They probably sue the state if they could, and it often happens as well. So sue as many people as possible, I suppose. And that's actually how, I know you've said it already, but I'll repeat it, is that's how the court found in New Jack's favour, Jerome Young's favour, and ECW's favour, I guess, as well, is because Eric admitted, or it was proven that Eric had asked New Jack to cut him. So therefore, I guess it was a consensual act in the eyes of the jury.
Yeah, but that should have been, that's a red flag right there. Not that anybody should learn. Like, I didn't know how to do it the first couple times I did it. But if you don't know how to do that, and also, once again, we're talking about an immature 17-year-old kid that's never been trained, claimed to be working 2 years, has already put himself deep into lies, and now they want you to bleed. Your first match there, nobody knows anything about you, but they want you to bleed, which, by the way, could very easily be part of any New Jack match or a Gangsters match. Very violent. And you still don't have the maturity or the self-awareness to say, I'm in a bad situation and I'm in over my head. It does not excuse to me, because if a kid came up like that to me and then I was like, quite frankly, no, he's not trained. First of all, I'm not going to want to work him because he could hurt me. Second of all, if I am going to work him, I got to just get out of there alive. My thing is, I'm protecting him, but I'm protecting myself more. So two completely opposite types of things. But I would be able to, if I was more of a veteran in the locker room, I guess I would have maybe said to Shane or Paul or somebody, dude, are we really going to do anything like this to get the new, not cutting, I would say, are we really going to get bad press in order to like cost us TV and pay-per-views? We already have enough people thinking we're all pieces of crap and we're all violent and we're dregs of society. do we want to do anything to make people think that way, more of us? We may, all right, say we don't get the news story. I would say, are we going to lose the building over this and never come back? We're drawing a good house. But I didn't have the maturity or, the clout to even say any of that stuff.
A couple more things to add. When he was being stretchered out, he was being worked on for quite a few minutes to stem the bleeding by the husband and wife team?
Yeah, Damage Control.
Yeah.
The original ones.
Yeah, Damage Control. Yeah, and then there's a couple of police officers who end up in the ring sort of like guarding him, I guess. A lot of people in the crowd yelling and screaming, I don't know what in particular, but then he ends up on the stretcher. He's being wheeled out, and then as he's being wheeled out, this is Eric Koulis, he gives the middle finger to the crowd. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know why at that point. I mean, it's obviously just someone who, I don't know. Well,
because in the opening, he was giving the middle finger as a heel to the crowd, trying to get heat.
He was, but he was like smacking his giant bottom as well at people. So I guess a lot of people call him fat in the crowd, and that was his reaction, I suppose, right. As well. Yeah, he was a great big fat bastard. There's one more thing. Speaking of which, that actually ended up costing him his life at the age of 22. And a real 22 at this time. He ended up going for gastric bypass surgery that failed, and he died on the table, I think. One more thing as a caveat. You said you wrestled Little Guido on the show. You didn't. I'll give you one more guess.
I was Big Stevie Cole at least, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's late 96, yeah.
I couldn't tell you. Please tell me.
Chris Candido.
I did?
Yeah.
Wow. You win now, CT, or even. I wrestled Chris Candido?
Oh, you never knew you wrestled Chris? Well, I mean, that's what it is according to Cage Match.
I think it was, on my memory, I swear it was Little Guido, because Little Guido did the entire run of every building with me, and that was leading up, like, we did Raw in early 97, and I wrestled Guido, and all those matches were kind of like house shows that led me up to that unofficially. Or was this after?
Are you gonna make me research this more?
Yes, I am.
Just to double make sure. I'll figure it out for later.
I would have remembered.
That being said,
Chris was one of the best workers ever and one of the most fun guys to work. I would have remembered that. And if I don't, I apologize.
I'm trying to see other places that you, other people you wrestled around this time. In between, you wrestled Axl Rotten.
That was in Webster,
GQ
Mass.
Gorgeous.
Who's that?
GQ Gorgeous. I don't remember him.
But I did wrestle Axl in Webster, Mass. That was the match where he could have turned the people on the BWO, but he didn't because he knew his job and what he needed to do.
Yeah, you also wrestled him in Allentown a few days beforehand as well. Let me just have a look. Who else? Chris Jericho, the Headbangers, and Axl Rotten. But that was for MEWF, in fact. That wasn't for ECW. Chris Candido, it claims, in the Greyhound Park in Revere, Massachusetts. Roadkill. Yeah, quite a few people. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that's right. I can find it out, but if you gave me more time. But anyway, that's for after the show. I'll have a look for that. Right, we're going to talk about one more thing. If we've got time, we might talk about two more things, actually, if we've got time, in fact, because I want to talk about... God, there's more than two things. We'll talk about two more things. Anyway, this next thing, you've talked about this on the DVD, The Rise and Fall of ECW. It's one of the most pivotal sort of little stories that happens within ECW, one of the most famous, or I'm sure you would say one of the most infamous, and it is the Crucifix thing with the Sandman and Raven and you and Meanie and everything else, and Tyler Fullington and Laurie and everything. Okay. Before we get to the Crucifix, let's just have an overarching run-up to how we got to crucifying the Sandman.
That's a hell of an opening question. Thank you. My guess is this was the version of Raven go, you know what would be cool?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, my Roman Catholic Church didn't think it was cool when I went to church next week. Anyway.
Okay, right. I actually wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
Did you actually get pulled up on that?
I got pulled up on that. I almost got excommunicated from the church.
Lord.
So that was the rumor, but I had locker room heat in the church. So basically, this was not the 2 weeks before or anything. This was literally, I think he and Sandman were talking about it because Sandman built the cross. Sam had a construction background, so maybe they talked every day and they came up with the idea. And Paul would give, for good or bad, like you said, he gave guys incredible creative latitude to do what they wanted sometimes and trusted to see if it would succeed or fail. This was brought up actually backstage that night, what we were going to do and everything. I couldn't interpret it in my mind because he's like, because Raven would do this pose. So in a wrestling sense, yeah, makes somewhat sense. You're going to do that. In a real world sense, my real world brain is kind of saying, all right, are we going to lose the pay per view or whatever we want to do? Or are we going to lose TV or are we going to lose the building, the company? We're dodging all these bullets from day one, little ones and big ones. Then it happens, and you could see it cut back from me to Sandman. So for people saying I wasn't saying it, I was we were doing the deal and tying them to the cross, and I kept saying, "This is effed up, Meanie. This is effed up. This is effed up." And Salmon's on the cross saying, "Shut the F up, Stevie. Shut the F up," which is literally what he said. "This is great. Shut up." Am I getting this wrong? The guy being crucified is arguing for his own crucifixion as I'm arguing against him being, and then they did it, and Raven kind of browbeat me afterwards for being a dumbass and don't ever talk like that. And you're stupid and you don't know, all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, fine. I mean, next week I found out just how much because it only took a couple people to let the church moms know and everybody that, hey, that's the guy. And I'm like,
Yeah. Hey, it wasn't on TV though, was it? Did they take out the entire segment, or am I misremembering?
I think they took out the entire segment in hopes that Kurt Angle would change his mind because that was the big. If Kurt wasn't there, I don't know if the apology would have happened by Raven, and I don't know if it would have been, which could have been a saving grace. Because imagine if it aired and they got 1,000 times what I got going into church the next week. So the blessing in disguise was Kurt Angle refusing to come to ECW. Good for him. He had somewhat of a really great career. He had one of the best ones. But, that could have put a stink on Kurt Angle. The WWE would have not invested in Kurt. I guess a lot of good things came from Kurt not wanting to be a part of ECW. We didn't get thrown off TV. We ended up getting the pay-per-view. We kept buildings. We didn't lose anything like that. And maybe other talent that would have come in, they would not have come in seeing that footage.
How much did it really bother you? I mean, were you bothered more about the perception that you were part of it, or did it bother you on an emotional level, a spiritual level to be part of
Yeah,
that?
I mean, it did. I mean, people could say, well, it's religion, it's stupid, it's this, that, the other thing, whatever it is. But I was just somebody looking at that, and that symbol meant something to me. That symbol means even more to me now than ever. People can believe or not believe or whatever they want, but there was that part of me also outside of my own personal feelings about it, spiritually, emotionally, even logically. The wrestling part of it was, do we really need this? And the business, even though I wasn't completely smart to these other elements, these exterior elements of wrestling, I was still deep down going, man, I'm just getting a push and like, please don't shut the company down. And please don't, I want people to see me, and I was with Raven. So obviously my vision now was do whatever we can to make a name for ourselves so we can make money in the other two companies. And they may not want to touch us after seeing this. And dare I say it, maybe they didn't want to touch anybody from ECW for a bit. I don't know.
You know, the one thing that bugs me about it is that why did they have the cross on the floor to make sure that as few people as possible would watch it? I thought just the pure optics, the pure setup of it.
The cross was heavy as anything. It would have took too long to get into the ring and put it up on the rope and do all that stuff. If you're looking at why it was like that, when we were doing it and taking it from out front of the ring, it was heavy. It was basically like two big, I don't know if it was round or whatever, but it was two big pieces of wood that were pretty much across. And this is during the time too where Tommy Dreamer wants to get shot in the ring. So we really don't, yeah, he still hasn't let that go. So goodness.
Hold on to that thought because I want to talk about that. Let's just talk about Raven's apology. So, okay, do you think that Paul Heyman, because as you said before, he gives a lot of latitude to people, but he must have known something at the very least to at least let it happen, and then all of a sudden he sends Raven out for an apology afterwards. So, okay, how much do you think that Paul Heyman actually knew about it?
Well, I mean, I think Paul would have to, you can't hide like hauling a cross into the bingo hall and then putting it under the ring. He had to see something. I don't know. In theory, it always seems like you can, like we talked about before, the Charlotte Flair stuff and other people. The wrestlers or the bookers or the promoters can convince themselves so much that it's the greatest idea ever and it's not going to offend anybody and it's just wrestling instead of removing yourself and saying, how would a family member or how would a family in general watching the show, how many people are we going to offend and ostracize away from this product? How many people that may be desensitized to 99% of what we do say, that's the one thing, I'm done, I'm out. Now, I don't know. There was another guy named Steve Carroll. Now, I don't know his relationship with the company, financial backer, or whatever he was. If he was there, he might have been the one that told Paul, what is this? And then Paul kind of feigned ignorance and then sent Raven out there. We might have had a representative from the TV network, from the pay-per-view company. I don't know about that part, but something prompted Paul. And my guess would be it might have been an exterior person or entity that told him, you have to make that guy go out there and apologize. Because it's not within Paul's scope to offer up outside of like with the Sabu thing when he no-showed or he was in Japan and there was that big thing that Paul came out and apologized to the fans. Storyline wise, I don't think ECW or any talent outside of this has ever apologized publicly in the ring right after the angle actually happened. Do you remember or apologize in general?
Well, are we talking minutes here? Are we talking an hour? I mean, how long did it take from
Sooner rather than later.
untying Sandman?
I mean, it had to give Raven enough time to get changed into his street clothes because he wasn't wearing his wrestling outfit, I think. I believe he was wearing.
I was going to say, what's the difference?
Well, pants as far. I only knew pants as far, versus shorts because I had the shorty shorts. But he had. It couldn't have been. It was the same show for sure because Kirk was there. I would say much sooner rather than any time later because the damage control. Hey, here's a thought. While I'm saying it, was it Kurt that went up to Paul, and Paul was trying to save face to keep Kurt in ECW? That's probably my best guess is what happened to Kurt, who I think was raised Catholic or definitely Christian, was like, this is too much. Okay, I'd say all the other speculation might have happened, but I believe Kurt went right up to Paul and said, I'm out of here. And wasn't Kurt's manager there too?
I don't know. I know what Kurt
His
said.
agent or
He
somebody
said,
was there or a part of telling him not to go to ECW.
I know that Kurt said to Paul, I'm disgusted, I'm leaving if my name or my likeness appears in the same show as that Crucifixion, then you'll be hearing from my lawyer, I guess.
Yes, that was also what he said, word for word. So that might have been Paul, might have been like, oh, no, we'll send Raven out to apologize. That could have happened that quick.
Yeah. Were there any real life consequences beyond that? I mean, did any channels drop them just by getting word of what they were doing, or was it just basically scrubbed from the archives? Well, not scrubbed from the archives, but just never shown, never broadcast, and then, there were no consequences beyond?
No, this was, I don't recall losing any more or less TV stations than we normally would on a week-to-week basis. But no, I think the Kurt thing, now that I'm thinking about it, Kurt saying that directly to Paul, Paul maybe saying, "No, Kurt, don't go," going over to Raven, telling Raven what to do, and obviously we get to the apology, and Raven did not feel, and still to this day disagrees, and it showed every bit with the apology that he didn't think he
Mm,
should apologize. I don't think
yeah.
I don't think the apology helped anything anyway. He's right in a way that this didn't change anything, but some of the other reasoning for not wanting to do it, you can argue that.
The
Friend
one
of the
thing I
show,
didn't ask
Raven,
you
friend of the
for,
show.
friend of the show, the one thing that I haven't asked you, and it's probably the most important one, and you more than anyone else will know this because you were right at ringside. How did the fans react? Were they, I mean, probably half of them couldn't see what was going on, but were half laughing or cheering or just silence?
Silent. You know,
Mm.
it may have been there may have been rumbling or people looking and talking and kind of a stir in the audience, but nothing like you would think it would be no heat at all and nothing. You could also say maybe it's something that Dutch knows the term, white heat, go away heat, or a mixture of all that. I believe the fans kind of like, even though I knew it was going to happen and I was there, as it was happening, it's like, is this really happening? Maybe the fans were in shock. Like, okay, we've seen some really out there stuff, but are they really doing this? That it's like, I think that they were, and then when Raven came out and apologized, the fans were kind of silent for that, if I can remember correctly. They
Mm.
weren't chanting, booing. They just kind of apologized and he left. It
Right,
kind
we're
of took
gonna.
all
I'm
the,
sorry.
for obvious reasons, it took all the energy out of the night. I don't know after that point if everything got back on track or not. It was kind of a blur. We were done for the night, I think. So, well, if we were done. If we weren't done, we were done for the night after that.
Oh, you were done. You were done. All right. Right. We're going to do one more thing then. So I just want to briefly mention that the pay per view is back on. You appear on WWF Raw at the Manhattan Center, but that is going to be for a future episode because, damn, there's so many stories I'm sure we can talk about that, including your match with Little Guido, Jerry Lawler and Taz, Paul Heyman, and the relationship with Vince
I
McMahon and
think
that
we
kind of
have
thing. That
backstage
is going to
stuff
be.
with all three of us backstage at the production thing with they had an interior kind of production area with the screens and everything. And I
Mhm.
believe that Meanie has fan cam footage from us being backstage in that standby area and then going out to the crowd. I
Oh,
got to get it.
we've got to get it. Right, we'll both bombard him with messages. He probably want to keep it for himself though, and like do it on his YouTube channel maybe.
I
I
will
don't know.
agree
We'll
to
see what
leave
we
the
can do.
house and do a signing with you, Meanie. How's that? That's a big ask, isn't it?
Hey, that is a big ask. I
Of course,
know.
I want to get.
Trust me, I've been trying to get you to go. Anyway, on that basis, we're going to leave. We're going to leave it on this one. We're gonna save the Terry Funk retirement for a future episode. We're going to be saving Beyond the Mat for a future episode as well. But at the time, this is April 14th, 1997 Wrestling Observer newsletter quote. And I know we don't do the Observer newsletter quotes here as well from Dave Meltzer, but I am on this one. Here's the quote, and it's actually sort of talking more about just apparently just the backstage area was so perilously close to just breaking out into an all-out fight constantly. So I don't know if you remember that at the time, but here's the quote, and it's a long one. I'm sorry, everyone. Shane Douglas and Sandman nearly got into another fight, with the heat stemming from last week. Let's just say that every version of the story I get from eyewitnesses differs from the other. But the basic consensus is that last week when Brian Lee and Pitbull number 2 broke a table, Douglas, who was the promoter of the show backstage, said they should be fired. The word got to Lee, and when Douglas found out, he was screaming about the stooge who told him and how the dressing room had stooges, and that's what's so bad about the WWF, etc. Anyway, when it came out that the Sandman had told them, the two pretty much started to fight, and the guys broke them up. Douglas and Tracy Smothers also nearly got into a fight stemming from all that. And then we've got... Should we talk about that bit first, and then I'll get to the second paragraph?
This is backstage at the. Well, this is probably Shane's Beaver Dome in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that booked the, 1997. So this is basically that Beaver Dome show, I believe, that they went through the table. I was not Was not anywhere near this. But then again, I'm desensitized because it seemed like Salmon and Shane Douglas were always going at each other here and there. And it was mostly Shane kind of like there was one time Sandman hit me in the back of my neck with the cane, and like I got like really bad stinger. That was like actually the week before or 2 weeks before the what's called the guardrail spot. So
Hmm.
Shane kind of stuck up for me and said, "You just can't keep hurting guys and whatever." And Sandman just kind of blew it off, and Shane got mad because Shane had a pretty good temper back then as well. So Shane was always erring on the side of like, we have to like be more protect, like you just said, the psychology of the wrestling card. And also we got to protect the talent and we got to grow. And now he's a promoter and he needs talent on the show. And then Sandman sometimes would play it fast and loose and they would butt heads. I did not witness this, but if Shane's promoting a show and they're breaking stuff that Shane has to pay for, yeah, that's like scratching floors up when you set the ring up and you scratch the brand new basketball floor and the promoter's like, "What in the world?" That's how you get somebody like Shane mad. So I am not privy to this, but man, what a story. I missed a lot.
Hey, well, there's more. This week in Scranton, PA, on the 4th of April 1997, they did an angle to quote-unquote injure Sandman, who wasn't going to work because of his cracked ribs, and in the angle, Douglas used Sandman's cane on him. Sandman was mad because somebody else was using his gimmick, and backstage the two were about to go at it. At this point, the different versions of the story differ, and it was that they were first held apart, and for whatever reason, some of the guys acting as peacemakers said screw it, and wanted to see them fight. Todd Gordon and Sabu or Pitbull number 2 were the ones who pretty much broke the thing up when it looked like it was about to happen, depending on which version you hear. Neither guy backed down, although with 1 week to go before a pay-per-view show, the intelligent thing in the situation would have been to avoid the fight, since it would have been stupid to risk injury. So what? Okay, right, so I can add a tiny bit more to that.
They would still go at it.
Oh, God,
ECW
yeah.
wrestlers aren't thinking about the future.
I was going to say, well, ECW wrestlers worried about risking injury. Okay, then.
Hey guys,
apparently,
let's all calm down and let's think this thing through. No, Nisi, you would have seen you could scrub like probably 70% of the content if ECW wrestlers stopped there. Sorry, go ahead.
was stopped and thought about what they were about to do. I believe, so in this, I can add a tiny bit more. I think Sandman once said in an interview that it was the fact that Shane Douglas had actually, he'd left the cane in the ring, and then Shane Douglas picked it up, looked at it, and then sort of gone like that, then put it back down again, or something akin to that. And Sandman said, I would have rather have him picked it up and hit me with it than sort of dismiss my gimmick, or something to that effect, and he found that disrespectful. What was it about Sandman and Shane that just never got along with each other? Or at least at the time, were always at odds?
Well, they're friends now. I mean, we're all, mostly, I don't know how Raven feels about me, but Salmon and Shane were just two different styles of wrestlers that saw the business much differently. Their psychology, both of them had great psychology. You can say what you want about Sandman. He understood his character. He understood the storyline. He understood who he was working with, and therefore he understood the match. He would be reckless. He would do stuff, but that was the Sandman character. And he would hurt himself as much, if not more, than the other person. Doesn't make it right, but Sandman, he's an equal opportunity injurer of himself and everybody else. Equal opportunity danger. That's all it is. Sometimes two people from two different worlds and two different viewpoints, two different pieces of culture within the professional wrestling industry are going to be like this. And of course, in ECW, guess what happens? Sometimes that makes the best storylines, the best angles, the best everything. And it's good to see they get along now. Now, I would, you could send this to Shane. Shane, what are you doing? Anytime that guy did not have the cane and it was left there for me to hit him with it, Meanie Nova and I fought over the cane. We started hitting each other to get the cane to beat him. I'm serious. There's footage of us shoving each other to beat him up with it. So Shane, what went wrong was give him what he wants. Beat the shit out of him with the cane. Sorry. Beat the crap out of him.
On that basis, we're going to leave it there. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back next Friday with, I know I've got the habit of saying, oh, we'll do part 1 this time and then we'll just move on to whatever next week, and we'll come back to it at a later episode, like we did with the TNA run, which we will come back to. But next week we are going to talk about Barely Legal. I promise you we'll talk about Barely Legal. We're going to talk about all the matches. We're going to be talking about all the backstage fun. We're going to be talking about all the post-show interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about Paul Heyman and his rah-rah speeches. We're going to be talking about Beyond the Mat, who's at the show recording, so it's a perfect time to talk about them as well. But until then, you can find us on YouTube pretty much every single day with a new video out and a new episode out every Friday afternoon Eastern, 2 p.m, I think, on YouTube and all podcast platforms as well. But over to you, Steve, to take us out.
Yeah, as long as we transfer and Dropbox are not our enemies, it will come out by Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time here in the States. I want to thank everybody for watching episode 32 of the Stevie Richards Show. We appreciate it. We keep growing. Ever since you made that little mention of getting to 100,000, we're gaining more and more subscribers right now, so we appreciate that. Please subscribe, click the bell to get notified. We mentioned it a few times, patreon.com/Stevie Richards. Check it out. We have watch-alongs, premium content, pre and post show. I put these show notes up for everybody to read. So if you're wondering, well, what's coming up on the show, you get a couple of days to actually look at the show notes and see what James and I are going to talk about, or even more specifically, maybe not talk about and add some bonus to the show notes. So please check that out, patreon.com/Stevie Richards. Also, if you could please subscribe to my fitness channel, I appreciate that. Don't give the guy with a Philly accent and a vocal cord implant more than a few seconds to do the pitches. So I'll pitch yours and then we'll be out. James has $2, one on the heart, one on the rock. Brand new YouTube channel. Awesome stuff, awesome numbers. James Romero, also on everybody on the WSI network. Hopefully Morocco and Shane are doing well and have not suffered the wrath of Final Destination, James Romero, the Black Widow. So, ha, says Jeff Jarrett. So there you go. Thank you guys once again. Take care. See you next week, episode 33.